to be included on the warrant. There's also a couple of items of new business, but those are the big key things that we are going to focus on. So with that, we're going to shift to public participation. Can I see a show of hands of who would like to speak this evening, please? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so I see 7. We're going to go with 2 minutes because I know that this tends to grow as people walk in as well. And I'm just going to let everybody know that I will cut us off when we reach 15 minutes because, as you heard, we have a pretty busy agenda. In the event that somebody wants to speak who doesn't get an opportunity to speak, please send a note to the school committee email. We will all see that. And with that, whoever wants to lead us off, step up, introduce yourself, and we will get things going.
Hi there, I'm Paul Nowitzki. I'm the father of a second grader in Merriam and a preschooler who's going to be going into Huebner. I wanted to thank everyone. I mean, I know this is a very difficult situation. My concern is specifically with moving the yellow north of Route 2 pocket to Blanchard, which I believe conflicts with the district's principles. Although this area appears contiguous on the map, it functions as a satellite. It is separated from Boxborough by Route 2, commercial development, and conservation land. Families must travel through Littleton to get to Boxborough and Blanchard. This is visual continuity, not a lived community. This pocket is also smallest and least cohesive group under consideration. With the declining population and students who are not already socially connected to each of the existing Boxborough community, moving them the furthest distance into a highly established school community concentrates disruption on the least able to absorb it. This also conflicts with enrollment logic. North of Route 2 is low growth, while denser, more cohesive areas exist that better align with Blanchard. I urge the committee to reconsider including the yellow pocket and apply AB forward principles consistently and transparently.
30 seconds.
The map is reminiscent of like gerrymandering where a neighborhood is connected to another neighborhood by a highway or something like that. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Allie Gilman. I have 2 kids in Acton schools and we live in West Acton. When our oldest was able to, eligible for kindergarten, we traveled across and did our due diligence and went to every single kindergarten informational night. We quickly learned that the schools were more similar than different. And so we very carefully made the decision that we wanted our child to attend a neighborhood school. Now West Acton is one of those communities that has been considered to go to Blanchard. Right now, we go to Douglas, and my kids can walk there in 10 minutes. If they take the bus home from school, it is 40 minutes. I really appreciate some of the stated values about keeping neighborhoods together and prioritizing walkability. And I just want to thank you for continuing to consider those as you make some difficult decisions. Thank you.
Thank you.
I always have this problem. I don't know how you, hold on 1 second. Thank you. Perfect, thanks. I sent this in an email, but I feel like I want to say it again in public here because I'm speaking on behalf of many fifth grade, rising sixth grade parents, and that it is so important for us to consider our fifth graders. As parents of a rising sixth grader for next year, I'm writing to express my full support of the legacy/grandfathering for all rising sixth graders. The current fifth grade class started in the fall of 2020, the height of the pandemic. Many of these kids also lost the opportunity to have closure and an ending to their preschool experience because of the shutdown in March of 2020. Many families chose remote schooling for the start of their child's kindergarten experience, while others chose to send their child to school. The children who attended school in person were required to sit at desks 6 feet apart and went for approximately 3 hours. Thus, they had limited social interactions. The children who went for remote also had limited social interactions with peers. I'm not saying that COVID affected the current fifth graders more than other kids. Everyone was certainly affected. However, in the context of this decision, I think the current fifth graders and the school assignments is very relevant. The proposed reassignment effectively breaks up friend groups like my daughter's wonderful friend group. While I know she and we will make the best of it and she'll make new friends and work to keep the old friends, is an unnecessary challenge being put on our fifth graders at a time when they are all trying to find their place. And let's be frank, seeing your friends in a different, outside of school and a different place is not the same as going to school with those same friends. These kids in fifth grade have challenges such as navigating intense peer pressure, puberty-related changes, developing a unique identity and social dynamics, and so on. This group requires support to build confidence and independence while managing all of those issues. It feels like the fifth grade class is being swept up in this comprehensive change without fully recognizing what the impact might be to this particular group of students. I really hope that you will consider this. Thank you again for your service as well.
Thank you.
Oh, okay, thanks. I'm actually going to read this time. My name is Arnon. I'm a parent of 2 kids in McCarty Town. And I'm going to use this opportunity to argue that now that we know much more about geo-enrollment, we should go back and reconsider this against the existing open enrollment. Now, as you know, the geo-enrollment does not have any significant financial effect on the budget, so this is not related to the budget. At the same time, it has a lot of negative effects. I'm going to just mention the significant emotional distress it's going to cause to our children. I think that many of your assumptions going into this decision with geo distribution have been proven wrong. For example, you're speaking about the formation of new communities from scratch. The fact is that the principals are staying where they are, the teachers are staying where they are, the only people moving are the kids. So what you'll end up having is the same communities, the same cultures, but with a lot of frustrated parents and a lot of miserable kids. Now, speaking with many in this community, I think you have lost the trust of many of us and the confidence in you leading this change. You're speaking about a tax override. Given that the previous override barely passed, I don't think you have any chance of getting the new one to get passed, which means we'll be facing ongoing financial stress and ongoing cuts in the foreseeable future. The only way, I think, to avoid this outcome is to bring this back to the public, give the community a chance to vote on the question of enrollment. I think this would restore the trust. I started a petition earlier today, publishing this to, again, allow people to support this call. If anyone listening to this is interested in signing this petition, you can find this in Facebook, in Acton Parents, or email me. The email is arnonar@yahoo.com. Again, arnonar@yahoo.com. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Caitlin Durance. I emailed you all this morning, so I'm happy to be in front of you to talk to you again this evening. I'm here tonight as a parent of a rising kindergartner and as a resident of Minuteman Ridge, a neighborhood of 88 homes in a deeply close-knit community, to express serious concern about the designation of our neighborhood as a flex zone. At this point, the school committee has not clearly defined flex zones in this policy, and this lack of clarity introduces significant uncertainties for our families. MMR is directly connected to the Parker Damon building by walking path through our neighborhood. Kids meet each morning and walk together, older kids guiding younger ones, parents following closely behind. This is the definition of a neighborhood school. You have said repeatedly that you want to strengthen neighborhoods, so I don't understand dividing one of the most connected ones. Later tonight, Nick is going to show you some statistics on MMR, and you will see that there's some lack of consensus in the current school choice between the two campuses. I want to remind you that those were choices and not mandates. Family could choose to attend a campus under open enrollment, knowing that a neighborhood was already there, or a neighborhood friend was already there, or choose a specific teaching methodology that aligned best for them. These choices happened all over town, so I'm not sure why Minuteman Ridge is being targeted in this way. I feel like the data is being misapplied in this way. I want to remind you that as members of school committee, you're in charge of setting the priorities and representing us, yet there's a clear lack of guidance here. The one thing that has been consistent is you have said over and over that you want to strengthen communities, and I don't understand how flex zones do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Julia Day. I live at 169 Nagog Hill Road. I have a second grader, a kindergartner, and a 2-year-old in daycare. This change in scenario 7 is a huge impact to my family. I work as an essential worker, and I have very strict job requirements, including being on site. My husband also has requirements for his job. We're a 2-working parent family. We do not have family nearby. This change, which is noted, is based on visual continuity and not travel continuity, would take away all the flex that I have in my schedule. And these types of logistical challenges are disproportionately borne by women like me, and I cannot believe that I'm the only woman in my neighborhood that would have this kind of problem with her job. I'm going to be forced out of my job if this is the ultimate scenario. And the change and the impact that'll have on my family is massive, and I don't think I can manage it before the school year starts. So I want to strongly encourage you to consider the impact of the different scenarios on families, including mine. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think I might be the last person to speak. I want to thank you all for your time and your dedication. I also have a 5th grader at Merriam. I do, strongly support what the previous parent had said about consideration for this particular group of children. But after hearing what all the other folks and their concerns, I do think that there has to be some sort of, maybe that's what the flex zone is, but some sort of pathway for families that can't abide by the regional restrictions, at least to begin with. For the 5th graders, as Sarah noted, the burden on them to make 2 massive transitions in 2 years, one to go from going to Merriam to another school, and then to junior high I think is overly burdensome to them, and will have some long-term negative impacts on their well-being. So I would just ask the committee in their best possible way to allow some venue to make exceptions for folks that can't manage the change.
Thank you. All right, this is going to be our last speaker. This is, if you have not gotten an opportunity to speak and you have things you want to say, please email us.
I have been in town for 19 years now. I counted it out. I have seen neighborhoods come and go in terms of the number of children in it. People rise up, retire, eventually move. It fills up with kids. So I have the somewhat less popular argument for flex zones. I think it's going to be a lot easier for families to handle moving in somewhere and having their kids in a school. I'm in a system right now where my kids, all of our neighbors have gone to different schools, and it's been fine. It's been great. I think that's going to be a lot easier for us going forward than having to redistrict, say, 10 years in the future or something, when we've had a significant shift. So next year's going to be hard for everyone. We've got just a hard time coming forward. I would love to see you all plan kind of more for the longer term future to avoid this sort of thing. Again, as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move to the superintendent's update. Peter, you ready for us?
All right, good evening, everyone. First, I want to just offer some congratulations to a number of our educators who are completing their 20th year of service with the school district. 20 years in one place is really, quite a feat and a lot of dedication and a lot of students and families that they've served over that time. So our educators this year who are being recognized for their 20 years of service: Becky Atchison, Chris Baird, Timothy Bassett, Kathleen Baleo, Vanessa Bergman, Kristen Ervik, Dan Goldner, Robert Graham, Brendan Hearn, Melissa Hubble, Lena Yaroschek, Raymond Gallagher, Kristen Kelly, Kimberly Landry, Kristen Lakari, Timothy Murphy, Christy Nealon, Pamela Reeves, Nicole Ross, and Jessica Sands. So congratulations to all of them, and a huge thank you. I thought that would be a good one to change the tone. Yeah. I also want to congratulate some of our high school student artists whose work was selected by jury for the 2026 Massachusetts Amazing Emerging Artists Recognition Exhibit. So we have Nathaniel Kim, Esther Song, Bella Calisi, Maria Didier, and Ayla Flanzer. So congratulations to our students as well. Want to give the school committee and our community just a heads up at our next school committee meeting. I'm going to be coming to you with a request for a modification to the current year's calendar as we proceed to the end of the year. As we've gone through the AB Forward process, I've had an opportunity to go to all of the schools, meet with groups of educators. We've done some educator surveys around, what their thinking is, needs, priorities, things like that. And I think the other thing that stood out to me was one of the top things that our families wanted in surveys through the AB Forward process to make sure our educators were getting what they need. We would like to request some additional half-days at the elementary level only. So I'm going to come forward with more details on this for next time, but we're looking for a couple of things. May 22nd is the day before Memorial Day weekend. It's a Friday. We're going to see if that would work as a half day for you. We would actually like to dedicate that to student class placement, and we can actually have all our educators working together across schools and grade levels on this if we actually have a really significant chunk of time that we can dedicate to that. So we believe that that would be really student impactful as we head into next year to make sure all of our educators can collaborate with each other across schools and grade levels to place students thoughtfully into cohorts for next year. The other one, thinking about how educators have to move at the end of the year and all of the work that's going to go into that, given the amount of change that's happening across all of our schools with teaching. The last day of school is always a half day, and that is Thursday the 25th. We also, the day before that is a Wednesday, which is an early release day for educators. We would like consideration for the Monday and Tuesday as well to potentially be considered as half days. I just don't want to surprise you with this. We're certainly open to discussion on that from the school committee and want to, get that on the radar of the community as well. But I think educators in particular really need a lot of support. And I think when we talk about what educators really need when they hear support is they need time to be able to do their jobs. And I think student placement and making sure sure that educators have what they need as they get ready to go into summer and into next year is going to be critical. So I just want to give you a heads up. I will come to you with a more formal request as we get there. I also hope to come to you with potential childcare options that we're able to provide on those days as well. So I'll have more information for you, and please stay tuned for next meeting. The last one, because I know we have a lot to do, I just want to recognize that this is Women's History Month. I won't say the same thing I do every year, which that means that it's from the first of the month to the end of the month. But in all seriousness, I do want to share, this is a significant month because throughout our history, I think women have been a group that have sometimes been overlooked when you look at the history, not only of, kind of the nation that we live in and the world, but actually in our community as well, when we actually look at who gets recognized for making history in our own community. So just want to recognize that this is an important month. Thank you to all of the women who serve on this committee, because that's a significant undertaking. And thank you to all the women out there, because you make an incredible contribution that has been oft overlooked.
Thank you, Peter. Did Nick sneak in here? He did. All right. In that case, as we transition, first of all, I just want to say thank you to everybody who has taken the opportunity to step up to the mic. That's not an easy thing to do, especially when you're sharing a personal story. And all of those emails that we have received as well, we are reading them. There are a lot of them, and I'm just going to acknowledge that I haven't gotten to responding to all of them. So we really appreciate that. As Nick's getting set up here, we start out with overarching goals back in our elevator speech that we wrote together of sustainability, affordability, and excellent quality of education. And my sense is that we're going to have some conversations tonight that relate to that, as well as the many things that have been raised from our community. So Nick and his team have brought forward some considerations for scenario development that's been based on community input. And we started out in our iterations looking at how do we take those and then go back and check ourselves on some of the other goals that we're looking for. So how do we look at education quality in terms of utilization, in terms of demographics, of setting these schools up for success? And that's really been what scenarios 1 through 5 looked at. And then as we hit 5, we sort of felt like we were getting some of that in line. So 5, 6, and 7, we've been looking at refinements that have policy implications. And we've heard some about that tonight, right? Walkability, neighborhood integrity, hometown preference, and also looking at transition experience. How does that layer on top? So grandfathering, what exceptions might there be? So that's been kind of scenarios 5 through 7. And our task tonight is to make sure that we give enough clarity to Nick and Peter to focus so that they can test all of the flex zone policy and the transition ideas that we've come up with and figure out if they're feasible. So tonight, we're looking at some consensus on how we're prioritizing our areas of Acton that will be assigned to Blanchard to balance our utilization and class sizes across schools. We are looking for consensus on our approach to flex or buffer zones, whatever you want to call them. And Nick's going to talk about that further as we go. And then we are looking at prioritizing the policies that we want to have evaluated, including anything that might require some sort of limited polling of families, because I think Peter's going to address this later, but to make this happen in a timely manner so that it can actually be useful information, we actually have to give them enough guidance that they can turn around and do that next week. So with that, I will turn it over to Nick to lead us through this.
And thank you very much, and good evening, everybody. Happy to be back. I am going to jump right into it because I do want to get through a lot of what I have to present to you all, but then priority-wise is to, as Tori mentioned, would love to hear your discussion and your consensus around a couple key topics. So my name is Nick. I am from Dillinger RAD, a Connecticut-based nonprofit, and we're here over the past 2 months to help design sustainable elementary attendance boundaries to help operationalize the vision of AB forward. We'll quickly go through project to date, talk two pieces of additional data that we just want to incorporate into the conversation, and then dive into the process of building the scenario, and ultimately in terms of, and I'm going to reiterate this, the 3 key areas I absolutely positively need from you all in terms of guidance around the Blanchard boundary or expanded zone, transition policies, and flex zones. All right. In terms of project to date, again, we're regularly meeting with you all, and we did host the March 10th parent webinar. We've been meeting with the district team on a weekly basis. This is slightly outdated. We've had now over 220 email conversations with the community, have participated and collected, participated in the parent webinar, collected a lot of different input from surveys as well as the interactive web app. We've continued to conduct a lot of the different data analyses that have been brought to bear, and then ultimately we're in the process of developing multiple iterative scenarios. So in terms of the interactive web app, that has been extremely helpful in regards to, again, providing context around neighborhood, different various neighborhoods, how people define neighborhoods, what individuals have felt was important in terms of moving individual neighborhoods to Acton or not Acton. And so what we wanted to do was just to provide you with a really quick breakdown in regards to the percentage of responses that we're getting. And so ultimately, in terms of the area in regards to what brought, I would say, the most interactivity and input was the upper Arlington area, the general rezoning suggestions, and then ultimately general geographic context. So again, a lot of different pieces of the puzzle have been informed. I do want to emphasize to a lot of folks, we are listening and reading through each of these and really trying to incorporate them into iterative aspects of the scenario. A couple different emails that were brought to our attention around medium housing prices. I did want to sort of kind of flag this for folks when we're thinking about the idea of zoning a section of Acton to go to the elementary school in Boxborough. So a couple different key aspects here in terms of thinking about the medium housing prices across both Boxborough and Acton. In general, Boxborough prices are slightly lower, but I would say very comparable to different areas within Acton. Obviously, there's the northeastern section that has a significant higher level of medium housing prices. But then I would say the rest of Acton and Boxborough are, like I said, comparable in regards to pricing. If you do look at research, research shows that property values are primarily driven by school quality, not just location. And so given that basically all of the elementary schools are very high performing. That's number one. Number two, not only would the students be going to elementary school, they will also be going to the middle school and high school, which is exceedingly high quality. So for those folks, generally from my opinion, that are concerned that their medium house prices will be hit, I find that probably not a huge concern given, again, it's tied to the entire educational system and not just the one elementary school. All right, so I did struggle. I knew that going into today's meeting, I needed to get clarity around the three areas that we talked about. And so initially, I was not going to introduce a new scenario, and we were just going to kind of jump into it. However, I thought it was really important to kind of walk us through the process of developing a scenario so that you can understand where these individual components that I'm going to ask you to weigh in on, where they fit into the whole process. So in terms of the objectives, again, I do want to emphasize it was an iterative progress in terms of how we've been developing the 7 scenarios. We are attempting to optimize, or what we like to say, the best fit model around demographics, utilization, walkability, and future growth. A lot of people, I do want to emphasize, feel like we are picking on them or identifying a neighborhood that is completely isolating them out. That is not the case. We have, the pie is the pie, as they say, and so Acton is only so big. And so as we look to optimize and prioritize different areas, these are trade-offs. And ultimately, at the end of the day, that responsibility falls on you all to determine, like we had decided when we were going through the decision points, what is worthwhile of a trade-off and what are we trying to prioritize as a community and what we are not trying to prioritize. So in terms of that, in regards to where we're going, before April vacation, we obviously want to, or you all want to vote on a final plan or a final scenario that will bring at least some level of understanding to the community in regards to a path forward, which I think for a lot of districts that are going through this, that is a very critical component, is understanding that a decision has been made and folks can sort of move forward and plan accordingly. So to do that, we're going to talk about scenario 7, but to do that, I need guidance in regards to how you want to prioritize the Blanchard zone expansion, which I'll dive into in a minute, the legacy option, and then ultimately the flex zones. So when we think about building a scenario, it really starts with, I would say, the base foundation, as I talked about it, in terms of thinking about the east-west versus north-south boundary. We did look at both. The earlier scenarios really did kind of try to unpack a little bit of that north-south boundary. And at the end of the day, given what we've seen, the east-west boundary is by far a superior foundation for a couple different reasons. One, it does, I think, do a far better job at balancing demographic or student demographics across all of the schools. Given how we know the distribution of various student demographics are across Acton, when you have the north-south, it really is a tale of two cities, so to speak, which is, I know, a priority that we're trying to avoid. In regards to some of the analysis that we did about future growth, again, splitting it on the having east and west really balances out the potential future growth, and I think could help manage the uncertainty of how neighborhoods are going to change going forward. So in regards to that, we always look at these two pieces. We generally will choose east-west because the north-south just, in our opinion, doesn't work. Then through these iterations, we've had a lot of conversations about walk zones. Ultimately, and as you've heard from various community members, right, those communities that are within about a 1 mile walking distance of each school feels that they are extremely both tight-knit communities and tied to the schools themselves. Again, from what we've heard and how we've reordered the decision points, the walk zones generally are a high priority. As you can see, based on scenario 7, we have endeavored to basically stick very closely to the walk zone boundaries so that if you're within 1 mile, you're to that school, and if you're outside of that mile, sort of anything's fair game. I would say the biggest thing we have heard of is around the Jefferson Street area, which is tied to Patriots Hill. We've heard you loud and clear, and ultimately, given the level of input around Jefferson Street, that would probably be the exception to the rule that we're thinking about in regards to the 1 mile walk zone. So this, again, sorry, jumping the case, was the Patriots Hill. Our decision, again, this is a kind of a key trade-off, right? Patriots Hill, which is just north of the walk zone, is zoned to Boardwalk, whereas within the walk zone, it's zoned to Parker Damon. So as we think about keeping the different neighborhood continuity together, you would have to sacrifice the 1 mile walk zone. We've heard loud and clear, like I've said, it's a small section of the area that, 1, they deem is not walkable, and 2, is tied to Patriots Hill. And so those are the types of trade-offs. And I will say tweaking around the margins that we can do around the base foundation when it comes to some of these things. All right. So now we get to the fun part, which is the Blanchard expansion zone. As we have sort of dictated and detailed before, the overall number of students that live in Acton and live in Boxborough really do max out the entirety of the elementary school system with the 5 remaining schools. So for that to work, there is going to be a subset of Acton students that need to go to Blanchard annually to make sure that we're balancing out the utilization. So a decision point could be made from you all that basically says we want to send as few Acton kids as possible, which is totally a good decision. I mean, it's totally a decision you could make. The trade-off is you're going to have higher utilization in Acton schools versus Blanchard schools, or I'm sorry, versus Boxborough schools. That is a trade-off. You can totally do that. We've heard loud and clear from a lot of parents that they don't feel like that is a valuable or worthwhile trade-off. So now that leaves us with the idea that there is a set of students, about 100, that we need to identify in Acton to send to Blanchard. There are ways to mitigate the transition. Anytime that gets brought up, I'm going to say that's a transition policy. Going forward for the next, I'm going to say 10 to 15 years, you need to have an area identified. Whether it's used or not, you need to have an area so that planning and future generations of kids can be zoned to Blanchard, even if it's not the case. So as we had sort of worked through this, we did try to identify all of the, I would say, possible options that both fit in terms of total enrollment and general logistical possibility. I'm acknowledging the fact that some of these I think are not very logistically feasible and don't really fit with some of the values that you had identified before. So we started off, just to kind of walk down memory lane, we started off with the green and the blue. There was a lot of pushback in regards to the blue, given that it's a walk zone. So then we went to the red. Again, the proximity to the walk zone and in terms of feeling like they were isolated, we wanted to entertain and identify other areas. There's the purple area, which is the Stowe Street region. That gets farther away from Blanchard, talking about being on the bus a long time. And the trickiest part, and I do want to kind of flag, even though visually we are trying to create a visual zone, some of these are really driven by transportation. We've been working closely with the transportation department at the district, and some of these do make more sense than others. There's usually about 1 or 2 entrances to the purple zone, which does complicate the transportation process. You can notice the orange, the orange has a nice size in terms of students. However, they are a tight-knit community that is within the walk zone that creates complications and also creates busing issues. You have, again, the teal, the yellow, and then very far up north you have Avalon as well. So we've detailed out sort of how or what could be possible. We have given you our 2 cents in regards to what we think would be a recommendation, but at the end of the day, it comes down to what you all value and what you all want to prioritize. And I do want to emphasize, I gave you the total numbers. I will kind of cut to the chase. The demographics is not going to change horrendously by school, with whatever you choose. So in regards to that, the conversation really needs to stick to how do you prioritize walk zones, transportation challenges, what you deem to be community or neighborhood continuity, and ultimately how you think, again, back to the satellite zones versus keeping the zone one kind of big chunk. Those are the types of things that sort of play out as decision points. So this is our first, I believe, school committee decision. Right? Does the school committee feel there are any other better options besides the green and the yellow, which we are sort of recommending that we should utilize going forward?
Adam.
I'll kick it off. Over the past, 2 weeks, every time a new color is identified on the map, we get another round of emails from families saying that you're, expressing their concern with their area being identified as one that is being shipped off to Boxborough. And I recognize that. I think a lot of people in the community also recognize we've got a difficult challenge ahead of us. As a resident of Boxborough, first of all, I want to say that Boxborough is a wonderful town, and that being able to go to Blanchard is an opportunity as well as possibly a challenge for some people. The other thing I want to point out is that we've gotten emails from people that say, I moved to Acton so my kids could go to the Acton schools, and I don't ever want to leave Acton. And I do want to point out that every resident of Boxborough goes to an Acton school when they go to the junior high or the high school. And so I want to make sure that those things are said. None of it is a value statement. I just think it's something that needs to be sort of shared publicly. This isn't an easy decision, and I appreciate, Nick, the work that you and the team have done to sort of identify different pockets. And I think that I guess the question I would have, I'm leaning towards your recommendation of Ethan Allen and north of Route 2. The question I have around north of Route 2 is, have we talked with the transportation department, and have they provided any feedback around the transportation possibilities, challenges for that cluster? Yeah, that's actually, outside of the green and blue, which I think is the most logical for bus transportation, given its proximity, the green and the yellow work the best for transportation, for busing. You would think purple might be, but given, again, the layout of how routes are constructed, the proximity of the different neighborhoods, and ultimately how different areas can be accessed via routing systems, the yellow and the green were the next best, basically. Thanks. Yeah, I don't want to say I like your recommendation, but I think your recommendation is the best option that we've got, particularly when we're looking in the long term about how we want to manage this. So I will be completely content if nobody says I like your recommendation. This is truly you have to pick one, and they all come with a weight that will have to be borne, and that is a decision, obviously, that is a very difficult one to make.
Ben?
So out of all the colors, which is the worst for transportation? We've talked about the best, but which would impact students the worst?
I think, generally speaking, Avalon, given its distance, and I'll sort of toss out with Avalon as well. It's a satellite, so the satellite zone aspect is also problematic, given a lot of the conversations we've had about the potential move, one house or two houses down kind of thing. So those are aspects that are considered. But yeah, from a transportation perspective, I do feel it's Avalon.
Nick, can I add to that?
Please.
Because I've talked to our transportation department as well. That Stowe Road area, that is challenging as well. That when you go through, it's all conservation land around there, and the neighborhoods are kind of in and out. And because you can't actually get directly to Boxborough from there, it would provide a longer bus route for students, is what they were sharing with me.
Lakshmi?
Hi, thanks for the research and analysis. I'm wondering, for each of these, the only difference is how much time it is between the Acton schools and Boxborough, right? Whatever time it takes to pick up the kids in the neighborhood, it's going to be the same, whichever school they go to, right? If it's yellow, let's say it takes about 15 minutes to pick up all the kids. It takes as much. They go to either Parker Damon or Boardwalk or Blanchard. So the difference is how much time it takes from one school to another. It's not about how far they are. They have to come down to that space anyway, right? That area of the towns.
I think so, given what you're saying, yes.
So what's the difference? What's the time difference? When an Acton district, when an Acton school bus comes, how much time does it add to come to Boxborough?
It depends, I think, on the route. So, for instance, there's the main thoroughfare that runs east-west into Blanchard.
Yeah.
And so the closer you are, I would imagine the more efficient time it takes to get in there. The one other piece I will sort of flag, too, is that it's the time to collect up the students, but it's also the number of buses and so for instance, right, 45 and 46 create a slight complication because of how spread out they are, whereas the other areas are more geographically, isolated or rather focused. And so again, creates a little bit more of a strategy. But to your point, I would want to confirm with the transportation department, but I think we're talking an additional, I would guess, 5 to 10 minutes going from Boardwalk to Blanchard.
Okay, so
assuming you're driving past, Boardwalk to go there, but there are other routes to get to Blanchard without having to drive past the two schools.
Okay, so you said 85, the Stowe Street, you had issues because of the constraints on entry and exit. Those are there no matter whether they go to Acton School or Boxborough School, right?
That is true.
So they have to come out onto the other street that lets them navigate to whichever school. So we are talking about 10 minutes for any bus that has picked up kids to come to either Acton School or Boxborough School. We are talking about 10 minutes.
That
right?
is true. Peter,
Okay.
would you agree with that?
Okay, thank you.
Yep. It's basically, if for instance, the downfall of purple is that we're probably adding 5 to 10 minutes of a bus ride, the same kids will have to get picked up by the bus and go to Parker Damon in this case, or go to Blanchard, which would be an additional 10 minutes.
I think I drove this the other day just to take a look. I think one of the things I found in that area is you get in, one, there's no sidewalks around there, so it's tough to get to and from, which is typical of many of the areas of our towns. But to get in and out of those areas for the buses, from talking to Jen Lashome in Transportation, was particularly challenging. But it connects into Acton in a more direct way than it connects over to Boxborough. Because in order to get to Blanchard, you're actually kind of winding up through that area toward Boardwalk and then heading over. You can go Summer Street too, but that is also traveling through a couple of different zones. You know, I'm not the Acton maps expert, certainly, but I can see what transportation was talking about when I heard that as a challenge.
Okay, but would you agree that 10 minutes is the additional?
I couldn't estimate. I don't know how, I wouldn't be able to estimate that well.
Okay, thank you.
Andrew?
A little bit of context on that. I live near that area, and it will take, if I'm in my car and don't have to pick anybody up every 3 or 4 houses, 15 minutes, 18 minutes to get from where I am to just past Blanchard. That's without being in a bus, without having to stop on railroads. That's without having to manage a bus in Acton traffic. It's once you pick up the kids, and that in itself is, you got what, 85 people there. You probably have, I don't know, 3 dozen, 4 dozen stops, because we have a tendency of our buses stopping at people's homes rather than stopping at consolidated bus stops. That's probably a 40-minute pickup. And add that 40-minute pickup from the beginning of that to the time they get, you're talking probably closer to an hour or more for the folks that are in the 85, the Stowe area to get to Blanchard. It's not as easy as any of the other places that are closer. It's not as easy anybody inside of Blanchard. Traversing down Central to Mass Ave to get to Blanchard, or Central to Summer to then cut over, is not an easy way to go. So it's not a comparable travel time.
Lakshmi?
I understand the neighborhoods and the times. My kids have dealt with an hour, even within Boxborough, because of their bus roads. But I'm trying to get an assessment of, on the decisions we make, what is the impact to the kids, right? I think that's something that we want to, I've lived here for 30 years. I know how these streets work, how much time it takes, based on the day and which street we are talking about, whether you're stuck behind a school bus or not. But we're trying to compare Boardwalk / Parker Damon versus Blanchard. So we just want to get a proper kind of assessment.
So, yeah, well, I don't need to tell you the answer. You just tell me you want to minimize the time kid stays on the bus, and then I'll pick the one that wins. But then, let me ask you this. If I say the blue and the green is the shortest time on the bus, don't sacrifice walk zones.
No. I'm not saying that. I'm saying it needs to be reasonable. I'm just saying it needs to be reasonable.
So I need to know, right? Like, is that the priority? Is an extra 15 minutes on the bus reasonable?
I think so, but people may differ. Yeah.
Liz?
I would think that it is reasonable, and I do want to, but I might not be answering this properly, sorry. I would rather prioritize the neighborhood schools, being close to the school that you are right next to. And essentially, and I do want to thank you, because the yellow and green scenario was sort of like what I specifically asked for. And I think that while it's not perfect, and I think that there's always going to be trade-offs, I tend to agree, and that's what I'm leaning most toward as the better option.
So just to reiterate, geographical proximity okay. Yep.
Vikram?
I think after, upending the lives and friend groups of over thousands of kids, as well as their families, and to really extreme degrees, as we're now learning, I think the very least that we could do is give these kids the shortest bus ride possible, and I think that was part of the idea of doing this in the first place. So it seems to me, so one question I have is, coming from Avalon, it seems almost equidistant to the 3 schools, but you can see that the road directly goes down to Parker Damon, so it makes it fast for them. For the same way, coming from Stowe Street, Parker Damon makes it quick for them as well. In fact, you can see there's a direct line, a direct shot, if you will, from Stowe right to Parker Damon, and then it's about 2/3 longer over to Blanchard, right, in the middle of rush hour, right, and slow zones and all sorts of stuff. So I think it would just be, on the other hand, as much damage we're doing to all these children, right, what's a little bit more, right? They'll get over it, I think, is what everybody says.
My concern with Avalon is it's a tiny little neighborhood, and as was brought up before, satellites up in that area can be problematic, especially for high mobility individuals.
So I'm hearing some frustration, and I'm just going to remind us that we have some agreements about how we want to work together. And I hear your frustration, and let's focus on trying to do the best for our students that we can. I'm okay with the green and the yellow. I think the piece that I was thinking about the hardest, which I don't even see up here anymore, I just have a really hard time justifying asking people who are blocks away from a school to take a bus to go to another school. I think it's really important that we empower kids and we empower families to help kids be as independent as they can. So came in prepared to kind of argue against putting the blue zone into this, and it's not even here. So I'd like to continue this conversation if other people have other input into it. Lisa.
I just had a quick question, and this might be a Nick or a Peter question about the buses. So for whether it's this, the purple area or the yellow area, is there a difference in the number of buses based on the number of kids that are estimated to be in there using the bus? Like, could it be 1 or 2 whole buses that could get that area and then take them to Blanchard, hypothetically, if they were zoned for Blanchard? Or
Yeah, I mean, I think
just trying to figure out.
Generally speaking, in this case, you'd probably have 1 bus for green, 1 bus for yellow, and 2 for purple.
Okay.
That's how it would work out.
Yeah, that's helpful.
Yep.
Thank you.
Andrew.
It would be nice to get to that level of operationalism with this, knowing the number of buses, knowing the number of students per buses, knowing the amount of time that it takes from these rough areas to get to the schools and being able to compare them like that. I feel like we're seeing a map that doesn't have streets not listed on it except for main roads. And we're seeing a map that has numbers, but not necessarily numbers that talk to upper lower or talk to ages, or even contiguous students inside of homes. And I just feel like it's like we have a vibe for what you're suggesting, but we don't have all the details, and I feel like I'm at a loss with some of that.
So I'm at a loss because you guys aren't telling me what you want to value. Like, at the end of the day, I hear you, but like, I can't, if you tell me, like, to your point about what you're trying to get at, right, which is, I think, time on the bus.
That's a part. Have you driven these roads?
Yes.
Okay,
And so
it can take a lot of time to go back and forth.
So then is that the high priority? Like, if that's the case, I can give you an answer.
I think it's data to be helpful for us to determine whether it's a priority.
I have given you guys a lot of data. I need values for which to make a decision.
Okay, I'm going to take a stab at this.
Good, please.
If you're within walking zone of a school, I think that should be a priority. And then I think we should try and keep our bus rides short, because shorter bus rides are better. And then I think we should be looking at long-term sustainability. We've got to build something that doesn't bring us back to doing this again. So that's my stab. Am I missing something that's up there that should be neighborhoods?
So yeah, just to be, so that eliminates the blue, the orange, and the teal, I would say the Avalon. And so what we're coming down to is a choice between the green, the yellow, the red, or the purple.
Okay, so
And generally speaking, I would have to do some math, but the purple is kind of out there, so it really comes down to the red, the green, the yellow, and that's it.
Okay, so that's my stab at it. Does somebody have something different? Vikram.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand why Avalon would be taken out of that. I didn't understand the rationale.
I just, in terms of the satellite boundary, like, there's a lot. So yes, I think, and I would have to run from a distance perspective. I hear you, it's almost the same, but I would have to check on that, and I don't think it is the same. But two, from a satellite perspective, that to me is setting up problems for those kids up in that area.
I would like to know 2 things. One, actually, what is the bus ride time? I guess this from transportation would probably be best. The ride time from Avalon to each of the 3 schools. And And also, I'd like to know how the community in Avalon feels about this either way, because that seems that might be a viable solution, but I want to hear feedback on those two things.
Understood.
Does somebody else have a different take on how to weight these? Okay, so Adam.
Sorry, I do. I want to be careful with the Arlington lower red zone. If we're respecting the Patriots Hill touching that walk zone, Arlington, the Arlington lower also touches a bit of the walk zone. So I just want to be consistent. So again, for me, that's where you get to the green and the yellow. I also recognize that Stowe Street may have the numbers, and to Lakshmi's point, picking up the kids inside that region and is a set amount of time. I'm not going to say regardless of where they go, because if they're not part of the satellite zone to Blanchard, then transportation could reroute differently with neighboring streets, and so it may actually result in shorter bus times if they're going to Parker Damon or Boardwalk. So, that's why I'm still leaning towards north of Route 2 and the Ethan Allen.
Vikram?
Another thing is, to Andrew's point, these are sort of, I don't know, nebulous, fuzzy, I think is probably a good way to put it. So we don't have actually clear street delineation. I'm in agreement with Adam that I'm leaning towards Ethan Allen and north of 2. There is a significant pushback from the north of 2 community, but that's why it'd be important to nail this down, and perhaps we can alter that region to a way in which they're okay with it, and maybe then that would allow us to lock it down. We haven't heard much from Ethan Allen, forgive me if I'm wrong about that, but I think really a lot of information, a lot of feedback has come back from the north of 2 region, but if we could sort of morph that slightly to where they're content to a large degree, then perhaps that would make it more viable.
Could you define what you mean by morph that area for
Well, I mean, here we see just a yellow blob, number
Right.
46. We don't actually see streets or houses, all these kinds of things, and we're getting feedback from people saying, well, this is dividing this in these areas. If we find out specifically what those are and drill those down, perhaps we could alter that to everybody's liking in that area, and that would make it more palatable.
So that's unlikely, just given the fact we spent a lot of time, especially with the transportation department, to kind of create that. We acknowledge that the yellow area is a very difficult area to kind of cut out, and because again, it's widespread and it's open. So I respect that. I think a better solution potentially is around the transition policy that we can talk to in a couple minutes. But ultimately, at the end of the day, that is a tricky area given the sprawl of the entire neighborhood. So we could sort of work around the margins, but we do need about 46 families to move.
But do you feel that that's something that could be investigated?
I mean, yes, but unlikely anything to be coming of it. But I can certainly look at it again.
All right.
Adam?
I guess, Nick, if we come to you with the consensus that green and yellow are the ones that we want more in-depth information, we want to do the interactive map, we want transportation to run the numbers on. My sense is we maybe get one shot. And so if we want more information, we're going to get more information on one shot because we don't have a lot of time left.
Yeah, let's put it this way. I have a better solution for you. What would have to be true for purple to win out over green and yellow?
Don't ask me. I'm not voting for purple.
Lisa?
Oh, shoot, I touched the thing.
Yeah, you touched it.
I think two things. I think when I was asking my bus question, I didn't ask it exactly the way that I meant to ask it. Not just with number of buses, but it would be the difference in the amount of time that they spend on the bus. And so to the point that the others have made, if that neighborhood gets its own, whichever one we choose, whether it's, the green and the yellow or the purple, would they, because they're going all the way to Blanchard, would they get their dedicated bus to that neighborhood, ensuring that it cuts down on the bus time because it's not picking up other neighborhoods and not going or meandering anywhere else? So I think that's what I was trying to get at, just trying to figure out, because I just don't want to see kids on the bus longer. And I also, I'm thinking about those commute times.
Yeah, totally. So if I could say back, ideally, question one is if it's I think it might be a slightly oversimplification, but we have one bus for green, one bus for yellow, and two for purple. What's the difference in travel times? Okay.
Andrew?
We know what bus stops we have inside these areas you're suggesting. We know the timing of those bus stops currently. We know how long it takes to collect the kids. We know how long it takes to get to those schools. And we have kids probably going to Blanchard from there. You asked what it would take to say yes to purple. Place that data on top of this map and come back to us so we know. And that will alleviate some of the concerns that we have regarding the amount of time that it'll take on the bus. And that'll allow us to be able to balance the bus time with some of the stuff Tori said, like walkability and the.
So I'm asking, what would you have to see?
I would have to see that to know what.
But I could tell you, purple is going to take longer to get to Blanchard than the other two. Does that mean, so you're not giving me any value?
It's all going to take a long time, Nick. I'm just asking for data and you're giving me pictures.
And I'm giving you data, but you are not telling me what you value.
We have spoken
Because I can answer that question for you.
I would like that answer. We've spoken here about how we want to minimize the amount of time for kids on the bus. We've spoken here that we don't know the time to get there. We know roughly it takes longer to get from here to there. We know we get stuck in traffic. But we also know we have data about buses that currently run.
Right.
And that you have a map that suggests the spaces that we're going to.
So why do you need to see the data? If I can tell you which one is quicker, why do you need to see the data? Just tell me that I want the one that's quicker.
We're here to make a decision as informed as we can. I'm asking you for more information. I'd like that more information. How do I value that information? I think that's part of our deliberation based on the data you present to us. I'm sorry that I'm asking for something you don't want to do, but we need to know how long this is going to take.
So, and I'm telling you, we are running out of time. And so if you tell me what your decision-making process would be, I can get that answer without having to come back twice.
I don't know if we have consensus on any of these right now, and I know that I've heard 4 people ask, how much time does it take to do these things? Not what takes more, how much does it? Because that could change as well. And all I've seen from you coming back to us is, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to answer your question. Answer the question, man. You've got the data, plug it in.
So I'm going to ask you a question, though. If it takes longer for purple to get to Blanchard than green and yellow, will that change your decision?
It will inform my decision. Yes, sure, of course it will.
So I'm going to come with that data, and then you're going to ask for something else. And so that's why I'm asking. I need guidance in regards to how to help make these decisions.
The guidance I'm requesting right now is for us to have the data for how long it takes to get inside that place to pick up all those kids, to how long it takes to go from that place to where they're going and what the return is. That's all I'm asking for.
Okay, it's Glenn's turn.
I think we have enough data. I don't think we should be going road by road here. People feel strongly about this. The green and yellow zones look good to me. I think we should move on to the rest of the agenda. Walk zones, shortened bus times, and balanced utilization rates are good values to me.
Vikram?
Just to follow up on the point Andrew's making, Nick. So the point is, if you are traveling, if you've been to New York City?
Yes.
So you're traveling from like 14th Street to 23rd Street, right?
Right.
It takes X amount of time, right? If you're traveling to 25th Street, it takes X amount of time. You're going to 125th Street, it takes X amount of time, right?
Right.
It's different 14 to 23rd than 23rd, right? So the point is, okay, we know that going to Blanchard is going to take longer. The question is, how much longer? We can see those numbers and say, okay, well, if it's 2 minutes, well, that's reasonable. If it's 20 minutes, well, that's a much bigger deal. And that's why, well, if it's longer or shorter, that's why we need the detail.
Okay. So if I show you, so this is the point though.
Show the numbers.
Yellow and green is quicker than purple.
How much?
Okay, so tell me how much, you tell me before I tell you the data, how much would it take to change your mind?
We need to look at the data to determine.
No, because I can tell you it's between 0 and 20 minutes. So is 5 minutes going to change your mind? Is 10 minutes going to change your mind? What's it going to take?
Well, it depends.
On
That's
what?
the thing. It depends, because I want to see for all three schools. I mean, Park Damon, see Boardwalk, see Blanchard, and I want to see the time differences, because actually I live.
So if it's
Let me
10
finish.
minutes, if
I
it's
live
10
here-
minutes, is that
I live
too
here.
much?
I live here, and I drive on these roads all the time.
I get
So
that.
I know, I don't think you really do, Nick. I don't think you really do. Because we're asking you for this data, it's available, please just give it to us so we can make our decisions, because that's
Okay,
our
guys.
job. Your job is not to tell us what we need and what we don't. We want this,
Enough!
all right?
Demonstrate
Excuse me.
professional and
Enough.
collegial relations at all
Okay.
times, Vikram.
Hey.
You signed
That
this.
doesn't mean shutting someone off.
Hey, guys, take a breath.
It's disrespectful.
We're getting, all of us, take a breath. We're getting heated here. Leela hasn't had a chance to talk yet. Let's hear what she has to say.
Wild timing. All I was going to say is, like, I think that there is an opportunity to disagree here, and I feel like it is incumbent upon us to treat people who are here working with us like they are humans with, like, feelings, and that they're here as equals with us. And I think he was, like, taking notes when you were like, Nick. And so I just am offering us an opportunity to reflect on how we're acting in this meeting.
Lakshmi. Okay.
Thanks for all the information, and I really apologize for the tone. So I think that was the reason why I asked the question I asked the first time. What's the difference? I don't think we need to go into every house-to-school mapping. I don't think that is going to serve our as any good. The goal is approximately how much more does it add? And I think we have established 10 to 15 minutes. I don't think we need more than that. My kids, having lived within a mile of Blanchard, have gone from 10 minutes to school to 1 hour to school in the same bus route because they have been picked up in a certain order. I think that goes to the transportation department, that goes to the school, the administration later. I don't think those decisions lay here. We know how much it is, and I think we can figure out the bus routes later.
My one last point on this is I hear you, and I will get you the time. And when I present you the final, and here's the thing, the next meeting, it's the final set of scenarios. So if I'm going to come, if you could tell me, right, if it's more than 15 minutes more from purple than the green and the yellow, don't bother bringing it. That saves us a lot of time to come up with other solutions. But if you guys cannot provide me with that, then I'm going to come with other, like I'm wasting time doing other things that I guess you will probably shoot down, but it would be nice to know now.
Do we have a time?
Just quickly, I just want to say, thank you for that. I just want to say that if because the numbers we know are available, it's not like we have to go research them. So if we can see those quickly, we can turn around and say, okay, this is what reasonable when we see that. Does that sound fair?
That's at the next meeting, though. I can't.
No, I mean, in the next day or
no.
two.
Yeah, if I could send you guys that information tomorrow and you email me back and be like, "Yep, let's cancel that," I would totally do that. I can't do that because I have to come back to your school committee meeting.
Right,
which is in
I
2
get
weeks.
that. But we can individually say what we think about it. Is that fair to do?
So I think what we can do here is let's just decide what time is too much, right? Let's give Nick that guidance, and then he knows that as he's doing the analysis, if it busts that timeline, stop, because he's already exceeded something that we think is too much. I heard 10 to 15 minutes. So do we have, okay, do I hear 10 or do I hear 15?
Can I because actually I have two kids who are in the school and they take the bus. I drop them in the morning because if the morning they took the bus, it would be like 45 minutes. When I drop them, it's 5 minutes. In the morning, in the evening they come back, they're like the second or third stop. And so it takes them 10 minutes, right? So there's a big difference between the morning, evening drop-offs. So 15 minutes, that depends on the morning, evening. There's some variables that come into play here. So saying that 15 minutes, are we talking 15 minutes in total for the evening
Difference,
and back?
so difference.
So I'm saying that it's not just, 15 minutes. That's meaningless in the larger scheme if you actually boil it down.
Vikram, we're talking about the delta. So
No, I
the
know, but
delta between green and yellow and purple, right? So if it is more than 15 minutes difference between, so let's just say it's a 30-minute bus ride to green and yellow, and purple is 46 minutes, so we're over 15.
And we're saying each way.
Yeah, both ways,
So
right?
if you go to and from, if it's that total time that takes
So, no,
in the
I'm not-
morning and the evening added together, that difference?
Vikram?
I'm just trying to be clear.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
I'm talking about the difference between, so whatever the total time is X. Oh gosh, we're going to do algebra. How many of us have Algebra 1 students right now? Total time to green or to yellow is X. If purple exceeds X plus 15, stop developing purple.
I'm just saying there's a difference to and from and to.
Okay, so
And
now we have an X and a Y.
Right, so we have to take
So
that
longest
into
ride,
account.
let's go longest ride. That work? Whichever one of those two is the longest is now X. And if purple exceeds that by, it's over X plus 15, we stop.
Can we take the total time to and from for each individual school and use that? Because I think that's going to be more accurate. Because it varies so much, but total round trip, I think, is going to be more accurate representation of bus time.
Okay, so you want to add,
A to B and B to A.
oh, we just added A and B in to get our X's. Okay.
Well, I mean,
so,
from like purple to Parker and Parker to
Yes.
purple, right?
Just to, thinking about how we would calculate this, we currently have no routes in our system that would model what the bus time is in any of these zones based on the new geographic model. Because right now, we can pick a bus and go by its travel time, but it's picking up students in all sorts of different places right now and going to different parts of the community. So there is no existing data set that's actually going to provide us an accurate answer. And there's going to be wide variance between the first student that's picked up and the last student that's picked up. The first student that's picked up on a bus is going to have a significantly longer bus ride than the last student who's picked up before they get to school. And so I think one of the challenges that we're going to come back with is, is there a specific house we're modeling to? Is there first student on the bus, last student on the bus? We don't have the specific bus stops planned. I know I've met with Jen Lachaume multiple times in the transportation office. From the time we give her one scenario, it will take between 2 and 3 weeks to produce accurate routes. So, and I mean, we asked her to do this. Like, I asked her to model what would it take to grandfather all the 6th grade, what would it take to grandfather, Acton students in Blanchard. And 3 days later, she said, well, I've gotten through 2 Blanchard buses, and one of them has 102 students on the bus, or something, I forget what it was, but it was over 100 students on the bus, which meant that it doesn't work. Like, she had too many kids on the bus. So it's going to be a really time-consuming process. I just want to make sure that the value we get out of doing that research is going to make sure that that's the decision we need, because I think it's going to end up being highly variable. And I think we can give an estimate, but I don't think it's going to be a much better estimate than going on Google Maps and putting in a starting address and an ending address and figuring out what the drive time is.
Just one point to that, the to and from, what happens is if you're student A, right, at the top of the list, you're dropped off first and then you're picked up last. So it depends. The morning and evening, the order is reversed. So it balances out sort of, somewhat, right? So if you have an entire total trip, you have the shortest plus the longest, and that's probably, and all the other things, we do have the Bus Right app, which has all the data and all the pickups and drop-offs, historical data for, since the beginning of the year.
It does based on our current routes, not these. Because we don't have any one route now that goes through either this area, because this is essentially a large, I don't want to call it a circle, it's not a circle, but it's a circle that has a series of like housing developments on either side of it. We don't have one bus route in our system that I can point to right now that says, here's what that route is going to take for time. And I similarly don't just have one bus route that's going to pick up all these students that I can point to, because right now the students in both of these are going to different places. And so that is the piece that I'm worried will be unreliable data, even if we bring you some number. We can go try, and happy to do that. I just worry that it's not going to feel like it's really reliable data in the end.
And I think that's a great point. So here would be we could either calculate, I think, what would be an approximate average time on the bus, or we could calculate the average additional time on the bus. Which do you find to be more compelling?
I think it's the additional time. So here, my problem with, I'll just throw it out here, with Stowe Street is I would feel horrible if those kids suddenly have this really long bus ride to Blanchard, right? It's like adding insult to injury after we've like beaten them up and then kicked them in the head. Now we'll do that on top of it. It just seems wrong to me. So that's my concern. I don't want them to have overly long bus rides, and it seems that sending them to Blanchard based on this would certainly do that. Also, myself, having driven those times, literally thousands of times, I would know, so that's my concern. So I'd like some data that would mitigate my fears.
So your concern is not how much additional time, it's the overall length of time, which is what you said. Well, this is why, I'm sorry, like I'm beating a dead horse here, and I apologize. Tell me what you're concerned with, and I can alleviate that. Remember, in terms of the pre-read, identify the problem, then we can come up with a solution. You tell me the problem that you want to solve, and I will do the solution. Right now, some of you guys aren't telling me the problem, and that's the problem.
My concern is overly long bus routes from 85.
That's helpful. I can fix that or address that.
Liz?
So sort of hearing that concern and also knowing how pressed we are for time, I still feel like purple is not feasible. And that's literally all we're talking about is the green and yellow and purple. Do we want to model both of them out, or do we just stick to green and yellow and really get more granular with the details? And I would like to propose that we just stick with the green and yellow and don't even look at purple, because it's going to be longer. We've heard that it's going to be more difficult in terms of transportation. And I just want to see what we're all feeling on that.
All right, can I kind of get a sense?
open to that.
Can I kind of get a sense of the committee on how you feel about what Liz just said? Lakshmi?
Are we proposing to kind of make a shorter list of the options we want to consider? I think it's a valid point. We don't want to be all over the place. We really want to focus what matters. And I think given the amount of time we can spare, I think we should narrow it down.
I'd like to make a motion to remove.
We're not voting on anything. This doesn't require a motion. I'm just getting a sense of the committee. Is there anybody who sees another viable option besides yellow and green that they want to pursue? Okay. Vikram?
Possibly Avalon, but that depends on what that community thinks about it, and also
I will calculate that.
But yeah, other than that, as far as I'm concerned, all the others are out.
Okay. Can I ask a question? Is anybody else interested in Avalon? Vikram, I'm hearing nobody else on the committee is interested in looking at that.
I'm sorry, about Avalon?
Yeah.
Come on. Avalon. All right. Of course, once again. Okay, that's fine.
Thanks. I would propose that we move this on
that
to,
works.
let's...
Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
All right. So that gets us to scenario 7, as we had sort of detailed before. And in terms of scenario 7, there are some problems when it comes to this, and I do want to kind of keep this at a high level at the moment. To keep it consistent in regards to the other scenarios that we looked at, the biggest issue with this scenario is utilization at Parker Damon Upper. As you can see, it's using 102% utilization. Now, the trick with this, and I did not want to seem like I'm trying to trick anybody, is this year's enrollment. We have started to model out next year's enrollment, and that drastically changes the utilization, but I did not want to introduce that as a new way to look at it, and I'm giving you it up front in regards to how we're looking at it. Some people did ask about Boardwalk. Why is Boardwalk so low in comparison to Parker Damon? Boardwalk is so low because we need to keep space for the special education sections. So again, the next time we show you scenario 8 or whatever the case may be, we are going to matriculate all of the students into next year's grade levels, along with move the special education to give you a more accurate picture of what next year's utilization will be. I do want to sort of flag, and I had it and I lost it. This year's 6th grade class, which I can show you in the appendix, is quite bigger than most other classes. And so you are seeing that general trend downwards, as we had talked about in terms of overall enrollment. Scenario 7, just really quickly, it does have consistent boundaries. It does not have satellite. School capacity, bad. Hometown guarantee, again, yellow for achieved for Boxborough. It does balance the student demographics extremely well. It does keep the recognized neighborhoods together to include the walk zones. It does include walk zones, and it takes into account the future enrollment trends in contiguous zones. So, and I did not update this, but the interactive web app is live, and so I encourage folks who are interested in it, if you go back to the old link is now hosting the new Scenario 7, and we encourage, people to provide your feedback. All right, so building a scenario. We now move to the transition policy. So if we're focused kind of on the Blanchard zone, and we know, generally speaking, the foundation and the walk zones, again, not taking into account some of the additional on-the-margin changes that we'll do. The transition policy is one of the last two things we need to sort of align on. In a perfect world, I think everybody would love for every kid to finish out their time in their building, move out, and then new kids come in. Given the state of a K3, 4, 6 modeling, that's near impossible. We know, I think, the two areas that we could potentially entertain a transition policy on is the sixth graders, as was mentioned, as well as the Blanchard extended zone. And so by that I mean, if we take the extended Blanchard zone that we've identified and say those kids will go to their campus that they're on, I say that, right, not their building, but their campus. They finish out their time. Any new incoming kindergarten kids that come into the extended zones would go to Blanchard. We've sort of started to run those numbers and try to play it out. Generally speaking, if we try to, and I should say, I'm sorry, the Blanchard expanded zone and any Acton kid who is going to Blanchard. So we would, and so let me try to say this one more time. The grandfather options that seemingly could work are any Acton student who is currently going to Blanchard, they continue to go to Blanchard and finish out their time. Any kid who is in the extended Blanchard zone in Acton would go to their previous campus. They kind of marry each other up. It would probably result in a slightly lower Blanchard zone initially, or utilization initially, but we think, generally speaking, the numbers could potentially work. The sixth grade legacy is highly unlikely given the spread at which they are around the entire Acton area. The only way, and I know a couple people were not too pleased with me tossing this out there, is if you chose to remove busing for the students who lived within the walk zones, that would potentially open up busing routes to help with the sixth grade grandfathering. So what I'm asking for here is I need to understand from a priority perspective what you would want to prioritize. Is it walk zones? My recommendation in terms of feasibility would be, and given what I know to be true, prioritize the walk zones to receive busing, prioritize the Blanchard expanded zone and Acton kids going to Blanchard transition policy, with the sixth grade more than likely not happening, but could be a potential. That is sort of what we're recommending, but I would love to hear from you all in terms of what you would want.
All right, I'm going to start down here and just work around because I see lots of hands.
I just had a quick question about if we had the transition policy enacted to allow Acton families to continue at Blanchard. You mentioned that how that would impact the utilization numbers. So I think I just want to have some clarification on my end. Does that mean if that were done on top of a Blanchard zone, or having that Blanchard zone potentially later discussion being a flex zone, like which way that would push the numbers in Blanchard for utilization?
So yeah, I think if I understand you correctly, I would say the flex zone is separate, right?
Yes.
This would
Yes.
just be a complete just transition policy over the next 5 years. And so Boxborough kids would go to Blanchard. Acton kids going to Blanchard would go to Blanchard. And then incoming kindergarten kids in the expanded zone would go to Blanchard. Everybody else would not go to Blanchard.
Got it. Okay. And then that would bring the utilization of Blanchard to like 96%. What was the percent?
Potentially. So this is where if you want to do transition policies, and there's two ways to now think about utilization. Utilization can be thinking about in the capacity of the building, but it's also as what many community members have brought up as the average class size, which is what they're really interested in. So we've started to model, yeah, do you want to?
Yes.
Sorry, real quick.
So, Lisa, your question was a good in, because at some point I wanted to get to this. I've taken data from Nick's scenario 7, and I've actually put that into class sizes because utilization rates, Nick uses them, I don't. And I'm going to be honest, like, utilization rates don't mean anything to me. What I care about as a superintendent is, can my buildings fit the number of classrooms that I need in them, and what's the impact on class sizes, right? And so I actually worked yesterday and today with Nick's data to put in how would we program for sections and what are the resulting class sizes for that. So I actually think it might be helpful before you talk about transitional policies to understand how that impacts classrooms. This is not my prettiest slideshow. I will say that. We were more concerned with the data than making something that looks nice. This is illustrative purposes only, and I will say this is accounting for every current elementary student in the district and having evenly divided the NESDEC enrollment projections for next year's kindergarten class across the school. So what we did is, and Nick said this, he was basing his scenarios on this year's data. This actually bases what you're looking at for class sizes, projects all of our current students up a grade and inserts kindergarten at the NESDEC enrollment number. And so I just want to go through and make sure we're tracking the history of this a little bit. On the left column are the school committee class size guidelines. All right, kindergarten 18 to 20, kindergarten first, excuse me, second and third grade 20 to 22, fourth, fifth, and sixth 22 to 24. Our current class sizes are right here, and that was based on our October 1st enrollment report. Okay, when we modeled out throughout the entire budget process and all of the AB forward work, we modeled multiple enrollment scenarios and budget scenarios, and we settled on Model C was what we were projecting forward and what we have budgeted for. That projected these average class sizes here. And when I move this forward district-wide, what you will see is we ended roughly here. All right, based on our current students. We will add some students between now and the start of next year. We'll also lose some, but typically we end up going up a little bit, not necessarily down as time goes on. So I just want to put that caveat there. I think our original projections were reasonable based on what we're seeing now. This is from the AB forward work and what school committee voted on when we looked at how are we thinking the number of sections per school might play out. So we had Blanchard programmed. We essentially had, and we were guessing at kindergarten because we really don't know kindergarten at all. But roughly 22, 23 sections in Blanchard. Overall, we're not as concerned about lower and upper Parker, Damon, and Boardwalk. What we're concerned about is the total number of sections. With our appropriate classrooms for our multilingual learners, students with disabilities, students who receive instructional support, who may not have a disability but need other types of support, we know that the target for these two buildings is between 42 and 43 sections is what we're really looking for, and that's what our principals have been working on in terms of how they build things out. And that is what we were projecting, and that's what we were working toward. And Nick has been working toward that. So when you see lines that go different ways, it's because he's trying to hit what we needed for our overall enrollment projections and do it in a way that can be durable over time, not just for 1 year. So in scenario 7, the only reason I did this is because it was the new scenario when it was up on the board. We could certainly run this for other scenarios given enough time. But if in pure geographic enrollment with yellow and green zones, we're not grandfathering anyone in either between Acton and Boxborough. We're not trying to grandfather 6th grade. This is just a pure geographic enrollment. This is roughly how the class sizes play out. And so you can see the overall school capacity of Blanchard. You can see the number of sections is pretty much where we want Blanchard to be. And you can see what the class sizes are. Overall, they're pretty good. 3rd grade is problematic for us, right? 5th grade, sorry. I saw 3 sections, thank you. So 5th grade is the one that's more problematic and not where we'd want it. That said, it's not that far off of what we said it would be, right? But I'm not saying we like it. I'm just saying it's within a student of what we had originally projected. At Boardwalk, we end up with 42 sections, and you can see what the class sizes come out to be. And at Parker Damon, we end up with 42 sections, and you can see where the class sizes end up. This is a great way. This does not include any flex or buffer type zones, right? So this is purely just based on the geography. And when you have a purely geographical enrollment, you will have fluctuations between schools in terms of average class size. One of the reasons to consider buffer zones and why communities like Arlington, Newton, Wellesley, a lot of our comparable communities have buffer zones is it allows them to control more closely the class sizes across schools. I understand that that's a community decision about how to move forward with that, but that is the reasoning, and that's why you're seeing some disparity between the different buildings. There are 107 total sections that we programmed, and Andrew and I sat down and went through this today multiple times just to make sure we were sure about it. We budgeted for 106 sections, and I came to you at the last meeting and said we're holding one section in abeyance to be able to do. I have programmed that in, and there were, I forget where it was, but there was one place that ended up with like 27 or 28 students in a class, and adding that section in allowed me to bring that back down and keep most of them within reason. It doesn't solve grade 5 here, but it does get to much of the other areas.
Sorry, Peter, is that current data or that will be next year?
This will be next year. This is actually looking forward. Yeah, I took every student this year, promoted them, so 6th graders here are actually our current 5th graders. This now is another iteration of that, and this goes to what Nick is trying to talk about with you now, is like, what is the transitional policy? So this still, it's scenario 7, so it's still the yellow and green zones. And in this one, what did I write? Holy cow, I was doing this quickly. The heading came in last. But this, This did two things, and we're not actually suggesting that this should be a scenario. I want to be clear about that, but I wanted to show you how I looked for problems, which is why I included this. On this one, what this does is it grandfathers in the Acton students who are currently attending Blanchard, but does not grandfather any students in the yellow and green zones. So what you get is all of the Acton students still going to Blanchard and all of the students in the yellow and green zones moving to Blanchard as well, which means, I mean, on face value, it's too big, but I wanted to go on a data-based reason as to why I say that's too big. What happens, essentially, in order to manage Boxborough's class size at that point, it comes to 25 sections at Blanchard. Overall, it's still 107 sections, which fits within the school district's budget, but I cannot fit 25 students at 25 sections at Blanchard. I need 24 maximum, because that is what the teaching contract is for our art, music, phys ed, library, things like that in those unified arts. So I can't go over that. And it's not practical to try and send a 0.1 of something from another building to this. We'd lose a lot of money just on the transitional time, and it's not worth it. So 24 sections is really the max for Blanchard to be able to do. 22 and 23 is better. 24 would be the absolute max. Over at Boardwalk, now you see some discrepancies in terms of utilization here. And I think that's primarily because we were talking about the yellow and all the students in the yellow and green zones, which likely would have been at Boardwalk campus, get moved over to Blanchard. But there's no backfill from that, so that's why you're now seeing different utilization. It changes how I would program sections in there, because, you know, adding one section or removing a section is a fluctuation of about 3 to 4 students, depending on how many sections I start with. So it really is a delicate balancing act about programming the right number of sections to get to reasonable class sizes. But this essentially gets us there. But as I said, it really doesn't work because it's just too many students at Blanchard. The next one was a purely geographical scenario for everyone. So everyone's in a geographic zone, but grandfathers in are 6th graders to where they are. I know our transportation department has expressed some concerns. They're just really worried about it, and they don't have a good way of modeling it out until they have one scenario to model. So I think I understand that, and I just want to represent, because otherwise Jen LaChaume will yell at me tomorrow and say, you weren't clear. But Blanchard, you can see what happens. There's a couple of things in 5th and 6th grade, but I can't add a 4th section to that. It brings the class size down to like 18. And that's not, we don't have the resources to be able to do that. So that becomes challenging. Boardwalk campus, actually, you know, it's okay, but the utilization is still relatively low, below the 42, 43, which means, though, that that gets pushed to Parker Damon Building, and we end up at 44. We have good utilization maps that provide for appropriate programming for all of our students at 42 and 43 sections. We can do that. When we get to 44, it starts to become more problematic. I will not tell you it's impossible. I'll tell you it's problematic, and it means that the programming in that building will not be commensurate with programming in other places. That could be solved potentially by applying a buffer zone or something like that and trying to move students around. The more complexity we add in, the harder it is to build the scenario. And by harder, I don't mean it takes more time. Harder, I mean I'm less sure that we can get to a good answer, is the challenge there. So that is when Nick said 6th grade is problematic for us. I'm not telling you it's impossible. I'm telling you it's problematic, right? And that's why. And in this one, again, it's option 7. This grandfathers all of the Acton students who are currently at Blanchard, so they continue to stay at Blanchard, and all of the students who are currently in the green and yellow zones continue to be grandfathered into the Acton schools. This does not apply to future students. We cannot get this to apply to siblings. We don't have a mechanism for that. Our transportation system will not be able to support that. That's going to be the challenge. But it does grandfather in our current students. And what you can see, 4th grade, so it actually shifts by 1 grade where the problem at Blanchard ends up, but 4th grade is challenging here. Boardwalk actually looks very good, and it's right at our overall utilization rate. And Parker Damon generally looks good. This is bigger in 6th grade, but it's also well within what we were targeting based on Model C. So this gets pretty close. But so, like, Nick has to use utilization rates because that's how he does his work. I'm not questioning that. That has to happen. And what I'm hoping is, as you see how scenarios play out, I'm trying to do the modeling on the back end, because not only is this important we have to now account for every student in the district. This is not about estimating anymore. It's about, these are going to be kids in seats that have to go to school. And we're also trying to place educators, and the longer we're working with varying section sizes between schools, the harder it is to finalize educator placements for all of this. So you can see these are not the same models. Just look at Parker Damon Upper, 6, 7, and 5. On this one, 5, 7, 6. Right? Now that you'd say, well, isn't that the same? It's actually not the same, because educators have grade levels they teach and things like that, and that's required movement for people. And then like 6, 7, 6, 7 down there. Wow. Bad year for that. Yeah, I know, I said it. Kids at home can watch this. But it actually loses a section over here. And so that means that the educators we're trying to place right now, we need to get to certainty around that in order to be able to provide certainty for educators. So just there is a chain of events that happens, and I didn't mean to go too long with this, but I wanted you to really understand how all of the transitional policies will actually impact what we do in our classrooms.
I just had a quick question. How many students are we talking about for the grandfathering from Acton and Boxborough? Is that about 200? Is that right?
It is from, we had to go really carefully with this because we had to account for all of any students in pathways, but also siblings and things like that. It's 67 students that, I know, I didn't make that up. It's actually true.
That's the number.
There are 67 students who are in Acton and scheduled to attend Blanchard next year. There are more than that. There's actually, I think, 100 or something like that right now, but some 6th graders, right? And then you have students who are in pathways who will be moving, right? Because it does not grandfather certain groups in. Like, I need to be clear. Grandfathering sounds good because it's everyone, but it actually isn't everyone, right? Because Conant students, there's no way to grandfather Conant students, and there's no way to grandfather students in our special education program. So those are 2 caveats that we just have to keep in mind.
Yeah,
That was my question.
okay. Liz?
Honestly, in the interest of time, I'm just going to come out and answer the question that you actually asked. For me,
Thank you.
priority A sinks to the bottom. I would like to see sixth graders in Blanchard. And I think that by not offering, I was worried that we wouldn't be able to provide that, even with so much feedback that we've been hearing that people want, both the Blanchard ability, the Acton kids to come to Blanchard and to grandfather for the rising sixth graders to stay in their buildings. But it sounds like this is actually a really good way to make that happen. And it's just a trade-off of we've prioritized the walking zones for people to have those schools. It would make sense that, we're unable to bus them to a different school.
And so, I'm sorry, when you say Blanchard, just the Acton kids currently going to Blanchard, keep them, and not worried about the expanded zone?
Correct. The one that, because I was going to say, I was looking at one and it said if we did both of those things, if we do not bus the walkers, then we can do both the Blanchard expanded zone and the current sixth grade.
Okay, yep, got it.
Adam?
Hi, well, one of my questions was for Peter, maybe if he comes back, I'll ask it. But I have first a sort of a technical question around busing, and I'm going to look to Sherry because maybe she can answer it. Do we have an obligation to bus kindergartners regardless of their distance from the school? Yes, I'm seeing nods.
Yes, we do.
Okay, so my concern would be, maybe there's not a consensus. We're going to look into it, it sounds like. My concern would be if we are, and I would also feel like we probably should have options for kindergartners to have a bus even if they're within the mile of the school. That kind of it goes against some of the savings that we're proposing to see on not busing walkers. And I also want to recognize that, we live in New England and there are snowy, cold days, and there could be a hardship for folks who may not be able to walk to school, as much as I would love for them to be able to have that opportunity. And so my worry is that if we're making stops for kindergartners, if we're making stops for folks who have challenges that prohibit them from being able to make that walk, then more and more people are going to want to take advantage of that bus service, even if they're in the 1 mile walking zone. So I want to be careful with that gray area, because to me, it says it's black and white. You do not bus anybody within a mile, and they're all responsible for either providing their own parent transportation or walking, or you provide busing as we have in the past for everybody.
So I think I must have misunderstood because I thought that it was, if we're going to do the sixth grade legacy, then we just wouldn't be able to provide busing for the sixth grade legacies that are within a walking
Oh, no,
zone.
I'm sorry.
This is just standard,
That's
all of it?
every walking kid.
Oh, then I retract that.
Okay. Sorry, when he was talking, I was about to follow back up to clarify, so, okay.
My question for you, Peter, was in these models, have you placed all of the special education students who are in specialized programs? So when we're looking at, say, Boardwalk Upper with 403 students, that includes anyone who may be in Connections or Pathways who would be classified as a 4th, 5th, or 6th grader?
Connections, Pathways, Lab, Compass. Yep, and siblings.
Okay, great, thank you. My statement to just close this off is I would choose that we do bus walkers and that we provide the Blanchard expanded zone and sort of not be able to do the 6th grade legacy. There's no good choices here, but I think that's the one that probably solves a couple problems and provides access for the most people.
I would love to look at whether, once we get these exact numbers out, whether we can do both the Acton students continuing at Blanchard and phasing in the yellow-green zone with kindergarten and the 6th grade grandfathering. If we can't do both, I would prioritize the Blanchard. Andrew?
2 questions regarding the 6th grade. Are we talking all 6th graders or just the Blanchard 6th graders?
I think it's all 6th graders acknowledging that our Conant 6th graders.
Obviously,
yeah.
right. But I mean, all the ones that have the opportunity to.
Yeah.
And to clarify, they would go to the campus, not necessarily the building.
Yeah, obviously.
Yep.
Other thing, actually, is probably more of a Sherry and Peter question. I know that we are reimbursed for transportation for buses for everything outside of that 1 mile zone. How does this scenario that we're talking about affect the funding that we get back, the reimbursement we get back, or even impact the decision of busing within that 1 mile?
It's actually 1.5 miles. We're reimbursed 1.5 miles and over.
Outside a 1.5 miles, or
Outside of a mile
so
and a
anything outside 1.5 miles, we get reimbursed for by the state.
For the students that are transported, yes.
Okay.
So is it 80%? That's what I thought, or is it full? Okay, but beyond that too, because I think he brought up a good point, or keyed my memory, in terms of talking with the transportation department. It's not only, because I was thinking the same thing, like, just add more buses, and given the challenge of getting actual more literal buses, given bell times and bus drivers, that is also a constraint that your district deals with as well.
Yeah, it wasn't actually about adding more buses, but it was that now that we have centered buses and centered geographically, there's now a hard point of 1.5 miles from each place.
Yep.
That could decrease the amount of funds that we get from the state because we're no longer sharing buses that go around. And that was really where the question was coming from. What's the delta between what we would have been able to get this year versus what we can get through the models that are coming through with that Walker zone now specifically tied to both the students who are attending the school and the schools themselves? And I just think it's an interesting question to try to figure out as we're going through all of this.
So out of the 67 students, these are the if scenarios. So Peter said 67 students from Acton come to Blanchard next year if we do it, right? Continue. So those 67 students, what's the distribution across the grades and the geographic distance? And the reason I ask is that complicates our transportation, right? So how many extra bus routes do we need to run to accommodate those students to be transported to Blanchard, and for how many years?
So all very good questions, of which I don't necessarily have on the tip of my tongue. I would say, generally speaking, just anecdotally, there is a high propensity of Acton students who are going to Blanchard to be close to Blanchard. Meaning, for instance, the green section that we're looking at, 12 kids out of the, it's like about 10 to 12 kids out of the 20 that would go to Blanchard already go to Blanchard, if that gives you an indication. So there is that propensity in terms of closeness. The grade spans do span across all the grades. And there was one other question. You asked a couple.
So how many buses do we need to run to cover this?
That fell into the bus transportation department. She felt that was doable without making any big city changes, so to speak. It was the sixth grade complicates the issue a lot more. And that was the extent of the information that I got, but I can try to get more information on that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Lisa.
I just wanted to voice support for the Blanchard expanded zone and that legacy for that, and then also prioritizing safe bus rides for all students. I do understand a lot of, the desire for some for the sixth grade legacy, but I'm really interested in making sure everybody has a bus ride because it's not always safe.
Yep.
Vikram.
I find that a really interesting piece of information coming in. I had no idea that we are now on the hook for any bus rides that are less than a mile from someone's house to school. That's a very interesting development. I'm curious about the cost of that. That seems to me that's going to certainly be a lot more next year. Regarding not busing walkers with a 1 mile policy, I can't think of any sixth grade legacy student who would say, oh yeah, I want to stay at my school at the expense of kindergartners and first graders walking in the cold and the rain to school. I can't see that. I think that we absolutely have to provide busing to the 1 mile radius, in my opinion.
Vikram, just to clarify, so were you saying that you said something about additional cost What did you think that was from?
Right, I thought for transportation costs, if it's less than a mile, the district pays for it. If it's more than a mile, the state pays for it, or a mile and a half. Is that right, Sherry?
Yeah,
Mile
so
and a
that's
half.
actually true now. That
Right.
Yeah.
But the thing is, now we have longer bus routes. So now having shorter bus routes means that we'll be paying more because more of those bus routes will be a mile and a half or less.
Not entirely, because Conant, what you were not saving on Conant will now be saved. I hear what you're saying in terms of cost variation. I don't know if it's necessarily a guarantee that it'll be more or less. It might work itself out evenly.
It would be nice to see those numbers, but that's surprising because I had no idea about that. I'm not sure other people did either.
I will make sure to tell the district because that's not my job. No, I know.
Sounds like a good
really
budget
great
sub
question,
discussion for next year when we actually have some data. Okay. Anything else on this one, Liz?
So I have another question that is really more of a question for Peter. Since it seems that logistically we wouldn't necessarily be able to offer the sixth grade legacy, is there a mechanism where we could offer that as an opt-in but opting out of busing? Like we can't provide the buses for it but allow families to potentially be able to legacy just this one grade, this one batch of kids?
Yeah, I've thought about that, and I know the committee went back and forth on that early. I think if you look at these numbers, right, like these are students, when we talk about grandfathering, it's not who wants to be grandfathered, it's where like everyone's grandfathered, right? And it's not optional whether you're grandfathered or not. I think the challenge will potentially be as we ask families who might either opt out of busing or not, or who wants to be grandfathered somewhere or not, these numbers are going to shift on us with students that go back and forth. And I think it's possible we will not be able to control for class sizes anymore. Because I think once a certain number of families say, if more families wanted to go from Boardwalk to Parker Damon or Parker Damon, or either way, one of those buildings' class sizes is going to get skewed. Or similarly Blanchard. It doesn't matter. And so I am worried about any options for that. We've now, with principals, detailed out a very clear timeline of what needs to happen almost like, to the day between April vacation and the end of the year to do this. We cannot do anything that extends the known placement of students beyond April vacation, right? Like we have to have locked in every student in our district by April vacation in order to do everything else that needs to get done and communicate with people and make sure everyone knows what's happening before the end of the school year. So I think, I'm not saying it's impossible to ask. I think I would be very hesitant. I think especially with the sixth grade, it either needs to be you're grandfathering the sixth grade or not. I think the transportation piece would likely skew it even more.
Peter, could you just put back the other slide?
Which one?
The one that 6, 7, 7.
That one?
Yeah. Is that the, no, one, the other one. This one, yeah. No, the one that seems to. Can you put on the microphone?
The one that everybody seemed to be more in agreement with, I think.
I
Yes,
think this
I believe
one-
that one, yes, thank you.
Yeah. This is the one, like I have the, like I want to be careful because everything in me would love to grandfather sixth graders, right? Like I'm empathetic to that and I understand the reasons for it. And professionally, I'm far more confident in this than I am in our ability. Like when I see grandfathering sixth, what I'm also worried about is now what happens if we try to do this and this at the same time. I'm actually open to trying to model it just to see what it looks like and bring it back for the next meeting. We can certainly model that. We have the data. It's just a matter of us getting together and trying to see what it looks like. And if it works, that would be wonderful. But I'm very cautious about layering choice on top of that for people.
So is this something we want to ask Peter to do?
I personally feel comfortable with this. I feel unfortunate about the sixth grade legacy, but it seems that's a really, really difficult thing to do based on busing and a number of things. It seems a really uphill climb and possibly at the expense of busing very young children. This seems to also make a lot of people happy because they do get to stay where they want to stay and they're grandfathered in. You know, the next generation coming up would then, of course, adhere to the yellow and green zones. This looks to me like the greatest win of all of our choices that are limited.
Anybody have a different take on this that they want to share? So I think what I'm hearing, Peter, is that we want you to finish modeling this out with whatever changes we come up with. I think I'm hearing that we don't think we can pull the sixth grade off. Do we? Okay, I see head nodding there, and that we want to bus everybody.
And so just to qualify, because I do want to stick to how I kind of asked that, right? We will attempt to do the sixth graders, but that is the third priority, right? Keep walkers, bust, focus on the Blanchard, expand legacy, and then sixth grade if possible.
If a miracle occurs, that would be awesome. Go for it.
Awesome, thank you. Peter, could you switch the presentation back? So one more conversation, and I think we'll be within the time limit for you to switch. All right. All right, finally, flex zones. Yeah, this hasn't changed too much. Given the nuance of what Peter was showing in terms of the average class sizes, right? The idea of the flex zone would be on a year-to-year basis, being able to shift a certain number of students from going to one school to another school and then remaining at that school. This obviously, and I've sort of said from the beginning, I would try to avoid using flex zones as much as possible, but I appreciate the fact you want to establish them going forward. So generally speaking, we can sort of, I think, come back with, much like what we did with the expanded Blanchard zone, we can come back, I mean, the entire district in essence could be a flex zone. I think what's more important is establishing the governing rules that you all feel are very important when it comes to the flex zones themselves. So I proposed a set of governing rules. I would love for you to nix them, add to them. This is, you know, just your principles on how a flex zone needs to be run.
Adam?
I have a clarifying question because I just came to this realization as you were mentioning it, Nick. You're proposing 3 flex zones, the green, the yellow, and the hashed zone.
As an initial idea for geographical zones, yes.
And then those 3 zones could each have their own base school decided and then the option to flex to either one or both of the other schools if needed.
So to that point, well, let's say the reason why we chose Minuteman is because of the geographical proximity. Somebody did bring up like, well, there's only like 1 or 2 kindergarten kids coming in, and sometimes that's all you need in terms of shifting to it. So yes, there is that case. There is that sort of division happening at this moment in time in terms of a few number of kids going to either which way. I feel we could again certainly choose other areas within Acton to be geographical flex zones. I would focus on making sure that the Blanchard extended zone is also determined to be a flex zone, because if the enrollment trends do continue as you would expect, there could be a world where at some point you're like, oh, we can start to phase kids back to Boardwalk or, and that's an or, Boardwalk or Parker Damon building for the sake of the fact that space is opening up, so let's start moving kids in so we're keeping people consistent.
All right, and the last point of clarification, we do have the option, and because I think we got some feedback on this from Minuteman Ridge, and I had the same question as well. We could say Minuteman Ridge is defaulted, I think, right now to Parker Damon.
It is, yep.
But we could say it's a flex to only Boardwalk and not necessarily Blanchard.
Exactly.
Because it may not make sense for that small group in between these 2 zones to go all the way over there.
Yep.
Thank you.
Vikram.
So regarding making these flex zones, my concern is that kids who may be in 3rd grade suddenly say, okay, well, no, now we're sending you to a different school. and this would go for Ethan Allen and north of 2 as well as the Minuteman Ridge, that could we somehow guarantee that kids who have started at one building would remain at that building and not transfer to a different building?
Yes, you'll see, is it the fourth bullet or fifth?
Okay,
Be subject
yeah, I see what you're
to.
saying. Fourth one down for the second
Yeah.
section.
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
Again, these are proposed. I tried to cover what feedback I had. Yeah, so I mean, I would make it, you want to make it loose so it's easy for the district to move kids, but given the I think, concern a lot of parents have, I would also want to add a lot of restrictions. So you'll notice, right, only may be activated when a school reaches 95% capacity. Doesn't say it will be activated. It's just that there has to be a compelling reason why, and then the district can choose or not to choose to do it.
And sorry, just to follow up, based on what you're saying in terms of data trends of growth in various areas, do you see that flipping anytime soon? Any of these flex zones being flexed, as it were, in the next, say, 5, 10 years? Or, I mean, do you have any, years out that this may occur, a flipping?
Not off the top of my head, no. It really depends.
Nick, oh,
weird.
Yeah, say that again.
Yeah, no, I said, no, not, like I said, I would love for you never to use the flex zone. That would be my goal in life, until potentially shifting back to Acton schools.
Nick, can I just add on to that? I think one of the things, and maybe you can jump in here if this is what you were talking about, because I know we've talked about maybe this idea before. The goal eventually is, because Acton enrollment is projected to continue to decline, I think the goal eventually is to be able to return both the green and yellow zones into Acton schools once the Acton enrollment declines. So it's essentially treating that as one of these flex zones, but right now we know with certainty that it has to be at Blanchard because of what the enrollment is. So I think that would be the place where I think maybe over time there's some capacity to do that, but initially no. And then I think the other one, I think right now, I don't know, I don't have a forecast for that out a number of years. I think that's going to be, I think that's really hard to predict over time.
Apparently, I'm the only one who gets to talk. That's
no.
disturbing.
Yours is dead too?
Yeah. Something happened on your side.
All of them. Come over here.
No, it's only yours.
It says public comment. Did somebody press it? Try it.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Yes. As I was saying, no. So Peter, in your estimation, it's not anything that would be happening in the relatively near future. I mean, not next year or 2 years or something.
Yeah, I mean, you would have to. I mean, I would say no earlier than 3 years. That's being conservative.
Liz.
Putting on my big picture hat,
I like that.
I agree with this, sort of the ceiling. If a school reaches 95% capacity, then that would trigger. Do you think that it would make sense to also put in a floor whereby, and this is me, fast forwarding 15, 20 years, if we have moved everybody back to, the Acton students back to Acton, should we put something in place where, we don't want Blanchard below 75%?
I think it's a great idea.
Thanks. A couple of things, and then Nick, a question for you. One, I definitely want to emphasize, well, let me add, if people are interested in seeing how some neighboring school districts use buffer zones, I actually recommend looking at Arlington Public Schools. They have a great page on not only their procedures, but also the mapping and how families can understand it. Newton also does it as another place. Two, I definitely would strongly recommend affirming to families that once your family is placed in a school, it does not change. So the idea of flex or buffer is not about an individual family's vulnerability to changing if you're in a certain address. It's about for people who actually move in for the first time and are newly registered. So I do think that's important because I appreciate a family saying, are we going to get yanked and toggled all over the place? The answer is no. There is no district that does that for a variety of reasons. So I would say that. The question I have, and this goes to your point, Peter, when you were talking to Nick about utilization versus class size, I'm wondering two things. One is, I wonder if the threshold is really about capacity as opposed to class size needs, because you could have a scenario where you're under a certain capacity, but you're in a certain grade where for whatever reason, just dumb luck or bad luck, you've got a bubble or you've got more kids strangely moving in that particular grade where you've got a challenge. So that's where I do wonder if it's less about overall utilization, and my worry is not about utilization, just like Peter. My worry is about what happens when all of a sudden we only have 3 sections of 4th grade, we've got a bunch of kids who move in, and now you have class sizes of 27. That's my worry, even if you're at 90% utilization. So for me, I actually think that there's a chance that I would want to use buffer zones even next year to our advantage if for some reason you had some churn, which we have every year. You have people moving in and moving out every year, don't know from where, that could both benefit and challenge us when it not comes to utilization, but when it comes to class size. Because in terms of capacity, you could, let's say you have 10 families who move out of a certain zone, and 10 kids who move out of a certain zone and 10 kids who move in, your utilization stays the same, but if their grade levels are different, that's where I have a problem. So I actually think that buffer zones could be used next year to benefit that piece where the class size issue is the issue. With that in mind, I am wondering, Peter, can you go to the actual, like the big picture zone, like option 7, or your, yeah. Is there a reason why we wouldn't, and I've seen this in Arlington, so I don't know if it's apples to apples. They create buffer zones that basically take the actual border between 2 school zones and say, anybody who's within 500 yards this way of the line and 500 yards that way, you're in the buffer zone. And then depending on if you move in and we need to adjust class sizes appropriately, you could be placed at one or the other. So that's what I'm wondering, rather than saying Minuteman Ridge, you're the flex zone, why not take between Boardwalk and Parker Damon, the green and the blue line, and say, you know, this far this way and this far this way, you're in the buffer. If you're someone who newly moves in, you potentially could be placed at either Boardwalk or Parker Damon, depending on the grade level that you're going into and depending on the class sizes that we have. That doesn't address the Blanchard Acton question, so I do appreciate your point about still keeping those zones as flexes the other way. But when we're talking about class size, that's my concern. It's not about utilization, it's about class size.
Great idea.
Yep. Thank you for raising that, Andrew. I was also wondering about class size, but I think you laid that out better than I could have. Andrew, you're next.
Yeah, utilization and class or capacity are things I was curious about too. Capacity seems to be like what the fire marshal says you can have in the building, and utilization ends up being something that's more specific to what the kids have, and also something we haven't really talked about, which would be the student-to-teacher ratio, which, you know, there's a delta now. We're going to end up changing that a bit with what we're doing here, especially with, you know, all the things that are happening. But that's not my question. My question has to do with 2 things that I've been thinking about with regard to this. The first one has to do with the governance, but not the governance from what we're saying, but the governance and the opportunity for the parents to be able to have some conversation about this. We don't have any way for the parents to have a voice or agency in being part of this. And one of the problems I think that we're going to have as we enter into this new era is that we'll have parents who maybe come into the school district who are in this flex zone, who have kids next door to them that are going one place, and they're going to be told they're going another place, and they want to try to find a way to be able to get back. There's also just the general issue that comes with going to a particular school. I know, Peter, you're being very thoughtful in the way that you're looking to place students, but I also know that there's certain things that inside our schools now, students have relationships with the support staff of the school to provide them with different types of safe areas for them to be a part of. And being able to have, as a parent, some agency in this that could play into the governance here, I think is important. We haven't talked about policy for governance and how we're going to bring parents into the conversation, how we're going to bring students into the conversation, and I think it's important. But the real thing that's been playing in my head is something you mentioned. 3 years. 3 years from when we start this, only one grade will be in the school that they started in. And that means that, if you are in kindergarten, you're going to be in second grade, whatever. We're going to have, well, not one grade, 2 grades, whatever. You're only going to have a small amount of the population that we're currently configuring for still in the schools that we configured them based off of. That means that while the families are still in because their kids are going from upper school to lower school to upper school, and from upper school to the junior high, we still have these properties that are aligned to the schools, and we have the schools that are defined by the properties and the kids that are there, but we don't have the kids going there anymore. And you're not going to have parents leaving, you're just going to have kids vacating those spaces. And the kind of ongoing durability of the geographic planning that you're doing here will either mean that we have to go through something like this every 3 or 4 years, because, again, populations age out of the schools that they're in, or have some other way of being able to manage a model that includes that. So my question regarding all of this, and it wasn't something that mapped to the 3 things you had on the worksheet you gave us, is how do we have this more strategic version of what we're looking at doing to be able to ensure that we don't have to go through all this stress every 4 years, every 3 years, to be able to maintain the balance we want to have inside the schools.
In regards to, well, so first, I think the geographical zones that we're creating are generally sustainable. And what we're trying to get at here is determining the flex zone definitions to be able to move kids across. So that is your strategic adjustment lever that you have.
Nick, I have a question. What's the difference between a smaller flex zone versus a larger one in longer-term sustainability?
So I think there's 2 pieces to this puzzle. I'll kind of tie in, I think, a little bit where you were getting at. A flex zone, if you have a flex zone with a particular set of students in it, for instance, I think in my mind, kindergarten would be your most logical sort of move, shifting left or right to adjust for various either class sizes or utilization. So a small flex zone would usually move 1 or 2 kindergarten kids, right? So part of the question you have to ask outside of a new kid moving in at a particular grade level is, do you want to move the entire entry of a grade? Right, so if you have a flex zone that has 10 new kindergarten kids, do you move all 10 kids or do you have to randomly pick? So to your point, you could add a little bit of a parent flair to this and ask for volunteers. Like, do you have somebody who wants to go here or here? We need 5. I would want to not or avoid having the district cherry pick or choose which family was to go. So you could put a rule in that basically says, if we're moving kindergarten, the entire grade within that flex zone has to move. That doesn't line up with Andrew's sort of like long flex zone. And so then if you have a elongated or a very large flex zone where you actually have too many kids that you want to move and you have to selectively choose, the question then becomes, how do you selectively choose? That's where you could, in theory, have a lottery, right? Where, okay, for incoming new kindergarten, you tell us where you want to go and we'll kind of move you accordingly.
Lakshmi.
So you said the governance is kind of self-sustaining with this kind of allocation of students, right, geographic. So I was wondering, what are the parameters that you would give them to say, I mean, without flex zones, without buffer zones, how would they do it? I mean, they have constraints on class sizes, maintain class sizes, capacity. I mean, they have constraints, right? So we have to give them some flexibility somewhere.
I mean, you do, but you don't. There's plenty of districts in the United States that don't have flex zones, and they deal with this all the time.
Yeah, I agree.
So,
but
I mean,
what would you give them?
In terms of the flex zones?
Yeah, not flex zones, but anything to kind of work with all those constraints and still kind of come up with a model that looks good, year by year, based on.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think flex zones could work. It's just depending on how you want to make it, either incorporating, parent voice or incorporating sort of a logical approach to the whole thing. So, like I said, most districts don't have flex zones. So it's one thing that they generally will manage accordingly in terms of either adding a section here, taking back a section, or adjusting it accordingly.
Thank you.
Lisa?
This might be a policy or Peter or possibly a combination question. So from what I'm understanding from our discussion on flex zones, would designating the green and the yellow areas as if it were to potentially to be just designated as a flex zone, would it be easier from a policy standpoint to be able to write it in about talking about the floor or talking about the ceiling for either way? Would that make that easier to do if we're trying to future-proof the scenario?
It feels like one of the goals, whether we're talking about overall building utilization or whether we're talking about class sizes within grade levels across different buildings, we're actually talking about more around a range of deviation from the mean than we are a fixed percent, right? So, if all of our buildings were at 82%, we'd feel pretty good about that, right? If all of our buildings were at 50%, we'd be doing this again, right? But I think what we don't want to have is a building at 95% and another building at 70%, right? So that's what we're trying to avoid is variation. And I think the same thing on class sizes. So I actually wonder more if there's a way of, and I don't know how this, I'd have to give it some thought, and we could team up on it, but I don't know if there's a way of talking about the idea of maintaining a reasonable balance across zones. If that's what I think I'm hearing is a concern that's coming out.
Yeah, so if I could build on that just real quick, what I'm hearing, right, is like there's some level of like, it needs to be predictable so parents can see it coming, and it needs to be consistent so that if you join a school, you're staying in that school. I think the biggest question I have, because I think I've gotten a lot of good ideas that I can put together, is how much parent choice do you want? So Andrew, you brought up a great point about that. Like, what would you want to see?
Well, truthfully, this is the first time I've gone through this on this side, and I know this is where you do all the time, and trying to understand how to manage for long-term durability is something I'm really concerned about, and I'm not sure what the answer is. I'm asking for help with this, because we need a model that will perform for us in a long-term basis. We need to be able to have some flexibility in it for a ton of reasons. And you have been very precise in the way that you've tried to build out the scenarios to align this incoming cohort of students to map to equity and demographics and socioeconomic and all the other things. That will change. That will all change as the kids age out of the schools that they're in, and we do not necessarily have the same demographic and everything following up. It's not that kind of a train. The people who are living in the places are going to stay where they are. The kids are going to stay in the schools, but they're going to go to other schools. And I hate to have us go through this. I appreciate, your thought. Kindergartners come in, give them, a lottery, give them an option, give them whatever. But I think it's something that we have to figure out, because this is not just make a decision and let it go. It's a long-term engine we got to run, and try to figure that out is why you're here, man.
Vikram?
I'm curious about how you chose the Minuteman Ridge area. Like, why that in particular?
It's in walking distance of both schools, and there's a split between the current people going to both schools. So,
yeah. No, it seems to make sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, it was just, and I kind of like, you could make the argument kind of what was saying, right? Make the entire walk zone around the two schools a flex zone, and then.
And my other question is this means basically we're providing school choice to the people who live in that area, so they would be able to decide which school they want to go to if it comes to it?
If that is what you want. We're coming back to I can come up with a flex zone, and I have heard from plenty of parents they don't want me to decide, right?
Yeah.
And that's fine. And so I can keep coming with, I've gotten some good ideas, and I respect the fact that, I am the expert here, but I'm not the expert in your community, and I'm not the expert in what you all as a school community want. So when it comes to that is a great call. Yeah, we can make the flex zone if you feel like that. But I know when I say like the lottery, you guys laugh and be like, oh yeah, we don't want to go back to that. And it's okay. Well, what do you want?
We're actually here because we moved away from school choice. That's why we're here.
Yeah. So from the context, if you don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole,
No, I liked it. I thought it was great.
So yeah, let's do it.
Okay, we got a couple more people, and then I'm going to mention it is 8:50, which was my mental note of if we go beyond this, we still have to pass a budget. It's going to be a really long night. So I've got Liz, I've got Adam, I've got Leela. Okay, those are our last three. Go.
All right, thank you. So I want to make some suggestions then to the proposed governing rules. I think the third bullet point, I would like us to to rephrase the activation.
Going to do that. Yep.
And I think the best way to do it is to tie it to, because I want this to be a durable policy, I want to tie it to our class size policy, because if one changes, the other will need to. So I think, Peter, I heard you're sort of like referencing sort of the median class size, but that may change depending on what our class size policy is. And so I think what I'd like to see is a proposal of the activation clause around number of students below and above class sizes, school committee recommendations.
I will do so utilization and I'm going to do may, not shall.
Yes.
Right, just from a military perspective, right? You don't have to do it, but it's up to the district if they want to do it.
Yep. And then the other one I would like us to codify is that the Minuteman Ridge is a flex zone only to the two campuses.
Yes. Okay, got it.
And then the one that I'm kind of toying with and struggling with is I want to provide more consistency for those families in the green and the yellow zone. And so I'm curious if you can identify the green zone as a flex to Boardwalk and the yellow as a flex to Parker Damon, just so that it's your default is Blanchard, and should we need to flex into Parker Damon, this is the group that's going to get flexed there. I think what I'd like to see is the feasibility of that, just sort of as you sort of look at the trends, but the more consistent or more stability or understanding that we can give to the families, I think would be a good idea.
Well, I think to that point too, I would go and find some other areas in the Parker Damon so that then you have a movement across two schools that can help balance that. But I totally hear what you're saying.
And then the last comment I would have in relation to the choice, I think we've got in the second to last bullet there, the fact that and I agree with it, is that we're not looking for this to be a choice. We're looking for this as a relief valve if we need to, balance class sizes, and those decisions need to be based first on number of students that we want to put in a class, and secondly, by the needs of the students, so that we're not overburdening a specific school with a certain set of needs. So for me, class size would be the first. The second would be the needs of the students and balancing demographics. And for me, that precludes the idea of choice, because if I've got 10 kindergartners and I need to move 5, I want to look at the needs of those kindergartners and balance the needs and demographics in the school before I go give a choice.
Got it.
So Vikram, it's going to be Liz, it's going to be Leela. Vikram, you've gotten to say a lot of stuff tonight. We have to pass a budget yet. We will.
Can I offer to just email me?
That would be great. Can we do that?
Just email.
Super. Thank you, Liz.
Adam, and I would entertain making the middle flex zone from Minuteman Ridge a little bit larger to be able to provide more flexibility.
Yep.
Yeah, that's all.
Leela.
Well, I think Adam complicated my thinking a little bit, but I was going to say that I feel like this is, we are assuming, but it's not explicit here, around like if you have a student who needs to be in a specialized program that is building based, even if you live in a flex zone, that takes precedence over the fact that you live in a flex zone.
Yes. I mean, yes. I will make that explicit.
And then siblings, that might actually be a place where there is a choice conversation with a family for our students who are in specialized programs, whether or not siblings are staying with or going to their geographical.
Right.
Okay. That was hard. Good work, everybody.
All right, next steps.
We're going to do this again. Go ahead.
All right, so it's scenario 7 is posted for people's feedback. Let's review. This has been a very productive meeting. I have the priority for the Blanchard expanded zone. I have an idea of how we're going to try to attack the transition policy, and I'm going to add layers of flex zones on top of that. I can come with more than likely 2 scenarios for your review next week that encompass all of these aspects for your vote. Does that work?
That works. And then as well, making sure that we get data to Peter so he can do more class size
So
analysis.
that's, all of that data will
Yep.
come so you can look at the whole thing, the whole shebang.
All right.
All right, thank you all very much.
Andrew, can it be an email?
That's actually the question. If we have questions for him, should we email him directly or go through Peter to go to him?
CC Peter.
Perfect.
Send them to Nick. That work? Okay.
All right, thank you all very much.
Thank you. All right, that moves us on to new business. We are on to the Select Energy Solar projects.
All right, Sherry, do you want to
Yeah.
talk a little bit?
So Kate is here tonight, and she can come up if anyone has any questions. She had put a memo in the packet with some pictures, and I don't know if anybody has any questions for her. This can be a first reading, or it can be a vote. We have 4 PPAs on the table with leases that she can talk a little bit more about.
Yeah, can I just do one quick preface in addition to what Sherry said? So we have been working behind the scenes on continuing to try and build out solar opportunities. There are 3 new sites, and in addition, as you know, we were unable to move forward with the battery storage pack at Boardwalk campus. And so one of the 4 options is an alternative to that is a solar-only project. And so I just want to thank Kate because she's been doing a tremendous amount of work behind the scenes to get 4 projects ready to launch that could have some nice benefit back to the district. So thanks, Kate.
Why don't I'll just take a couple minutes. I'm delighted to be bringing you a palate cleanser. I think the team has been working hard on this. I'm proud of being able to put this in front of you. It has taken diligence and focus. The Inflation Reduction Act identified a 10-year runway for solar. That got changed last summer. There's a deadline approaching. This is a really wonderful window for moving on solar, and lots of our colleagues are doing that around the state. And there are, what you have in front of you are 4 proposals to do solar installations. 2 parking canopies here on the main campus with pictures in the memo. And somebody's just pulled up, Peter just pulled up, this is the rooftop of this building, also rooftop at Boardwalk, and then 2 parking canopies on this campus as well. So the 3 arrays planned for this campus would provide about 1/3 of the electricity that this campus uses. The Boardwalk rooftop would provide about 1/3, as it happens, of the electricity used at Boardwalk as well. The price is good. We have 2 different projections, and both projections, including the conservative, highly professional one, we come out ahead. Budget certainty is tremendously valuable, as you will know. And it, also happens to move us forward on our decarbonization goals. A piece of information that's not in the memo is that these contracts also have a 0% escalator. So the price that you're seeing for electricity, actually, I don't know that that's in the memo, but the price that we're signing up for is the same for the length of the contract. And they're often structured with a 2% escalator to make the first year look better. In this case, it's the same price throughout the contract. I'm happy to entertain questions.
I'm going to make you 2 rock, paper, scissors.
Kate, thank you so much for this. 2 quick questions. the contract savings that we're seeing here, that's the difference between what we purchase energy from Eversource versus what we would purchase energy for off the solar array, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Roughly. I mean, there's some more technical details there, but yes.
And for all of these, do we have any, not we, actually, will the installers have any, will they have to wait for interconnection agreements and approvals to be able to start and or energize the projects?
Yes, of course. And those are already applied for, they're underway. So engineering is not complete. I don't think they have positive signals back from Eversource, but I don't think they have a interconnection permit in hand. I also want to mention there's a 30% federal tax credit still in place. There's, the pathway has been filled with potholes, and so there's some risk that I should mention that 30% tax credit doesn't come through, but that risk would fall entirely on Select. They would cancel the projects if that didn't come through, but there's no risk to the district. And I think it's unlikely. It's all well established, and these guys are pros, so.
I have a third bonus question. We're scheduled, the plan is to start these projects this summer, is that correct?
We'll see. They're stacking up projects as fast as they can. The steel in the parking lots can only be done in the summer. I don't know if they'll hit that this summer. They can't order steel until these contracts are signed. And the rooftops, they think they can do during the school year with minimal disruption. So,
awesome.
To be determined.
Thank you for the somewhere between $964,000 and $3,629,000 in district savings.
Yeah, it's great. Really wonderful.
Andrew. Thanks. I'm thrilled that we're getting solar back. I was concerned we couldn't get the battery going, and I know the boardwalk was built to be with zero net, right? And I know this is not going to be the same. What's the difference between what we are anticipating and what we're going to be able to achieve now because we're not using the batteries?
It's a really good question. Yes, Boardwalk was planned as a net zero building. The triumph of the building, I take every opportunity to say, is that it was put up right and really well, and the building envelope is phenomenal. The system inside it is all electric geothermal, small and highly efficient. The building was designed to operate at very low energy use. It's operating better than that. Better than designed this year, even better than last year. It's remarkable. So you get one shot at putting a building up right, and we did a great job with it. The team did a great job with it. Where the electricity comes from is a secondary question. The plan was to generate a lot on site. That hasn't worked out. The most valuable part of that plan was the rooftop solar, which is cheap to put in. So it makes us money. The battery was the next most valuable thing because it's actually a revenue generator. The parking canopy was going to be kind of a wash. So at this time, it's important to seize this opportunity to at least put rooftop solar up there.
The other question, because we're not having the battery anymore, which means that we're not gathering solar energy during off-peak hours for the use of the building, are we now just pushing this straight through to the grid, and that's how we're able to get this? So,
yes.
And how much of this is we're going to be able to use? Well, it doesn't matter. I'm really thrilled that you're doing this. Thank you for putting it in place.
Yes, less than ideal. We wish we could put in a battery, and I think it's entirely possible that 3, 4, 5 years from now, we might entertain another battery proposal. The state is improving its permitting process. We could take a look at that, but at this time, that's not an option. And so what we're doing is using the grid as a giant battery, if you will. We're feeding solar into it when we have too much, and then pulling at night from the grid.
One last thing, and this is actually towards Peter. I mentioned it during budget sub as well. The Boardwalk building was built with the understanding the parking lot would have a canopy over it. So we have not only the networking and the wires and everything built into the parking lot, we have giant holes in the parking lot. What's the plan for Boardwalk parking lot if we're not going to have the canopy over there?
And I'll just mention, what's under the parking lot is empty conduit. So there's no copper.
Great.
I think we'll probably just fill it in, those areas.
Yeah, it's all stable. We put sleeves on their edges and put the gravel in that. So if we get a notion, we could have another vendor come in and plan to try to find the sleeves and put the steel up and put parking canopies over. But it's not cheap, and the 30% federal tax credit is about to disappear. So
Ben?
Real quick question. Do you have a net metering contract with Eversource yet? And what is the risk if you do not get one?
Let's see, that's specified in the PPAs and in the interconnection application, so we should be fine with that. There's one question about whether it's going to be on-bill credit, and that is also in the application that's filed, and I've written somebody at Eversource to get a confirmation, but I don't anticipate any problem.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Adam.
I move to approve the power purchase agreements and leases to authorize Superintendent Peter Light to execute these agreements along with any associated necessary or incidental documents. Item 1, it's a very long one. Item 1, lease agreement and power purchase agreement pertaining to the solar project located at R.J. Gay Junior High School, 16 Charter Road, and 441 Massachusetts Avenue, Acton, Massachusetts 01720. Item 2, lease agreement and power purchase agreement pertaining to the solar project located at the ABRSD High School Senior Lot, 36 Charter Road and 108 Hayward Rd Rear, Acton, Massachusetts 01720. Item 3, lease agreement and power purchase agreement pertaining to the solar project located at the Paul P. Gates Elementary School, 75 Spruce Street, Acton, Massachusetts 01720. And item 4, lease agreement and power purchase agreement pertaining to the solar project located at the Acton-Boxborough Regional School District Administration Building, 15 Charter Road, Acton, Massachusetts 01720. For the avoidance of doubt, the PPAs are approved at the prices stated therein, and if the price is subsequently reduced in accordance with the power options policies and the school committee approves the superintendent to execute the contract amendment to that effect.
Second.
All right, that was moved by Adam, seconded by Ben. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you, Kate.
Thank you all so much. Appreciate it.
All right, that brings us up to the temporary use of Conant School building by the town of Acton. Peter, are you going to speak to that?
Yeah, sure. So the town of Acton, the town manager approached me, and we have since received the letter that's in your packet. Essentially, a request from the town of Acton, if Conant is going to be vacant next year, to be able to use the Conant building temporarily because they are anticipating, pending approval at town meeting, that they would move forward with a massive renovation on the current town hall. We would obviously need to work out details between the town manager and I, because we will need to use Conant for some things next year. There's definitely going to be storage that we need. We anticipate we might need access to the gym for community education purposes, things like that. But otherwise, it would essentially be a vacant building. I think one of the reasons I wanted to bring this forward was from a school district benefit. The town would be assuming the costs of operating Conant instead of the school district. We would still probably pay the bills because it would be our building, but we would just bill the town and at least recoup the utility costs for that. And they would provide, the custodial maintenance, things like that, while they're using it. So it seemed like a reasonable thing to me to bring forward. And if you are okay with it, I will start to work toward an MOU with the town and negotiate what we need with the town manager.
Vikram?
As long as the polar bears are placed where people are happy with them being placed, I'm okay with it.
Let's. Okay.
All right. Net, please. Try to get a net agreement with them where they're paying everything so we don't have to.
Okay. Awesome.
Thank you.
Well, that brings us to the final budget.
All right, there continue to be no changes to the budget, so I am just projecting what the vote language is. Just as a reminder, it does take a 2/3 majority of all members of the school committee in order to pass a budget, which is 8 votes. So just we do need 8 votes in order to pass the budget. That hung us up a couple of years ago, and we had to come back a couple times to get that right. Happy to answer any last questions, but there are no changes to what we've been projecting. So typical is this meeting, I don't do any new presentations.
Go for it, Liz.
I move that the committee adopt the budget of the Acton-Boxborough Regional School District for the fiscal year July 1st, 2026 through June 30th, 2027, as presented in the amount of $122,593,238, which is reduced by estimated receipts and available funds in the following amounts. Anticipated Chapter 70 aid in the amount of $17,566,746. Anticipated state transportation aid in the amount of $2,619,357. Anticipated state charter school aid in the amount of $75,000. Anticipated Medicaid reimbursement of $200,000, anticipated investment earnings of $300,000, estimated miscellaneous revenues of $23,500, and transfers from the following district reserves: excess and deficiency fund in the amount of $1,243,850, capital stabilization fund in the amount of $0, for a net amount to be assessed to member towns in accordance with the education reform law and the terms of the regional agreement and amendments thereto as follows. Acton, $82,830,682, consisting of a capital assessment of $4,739,398 and an operating assessment of $78,091,284, and Boxborough, $17,734,103, consisting of a capital assessment of $1,009,355 and an operating assessment of $16,724,748.
Second.
All right, well done. Your practice reading warrants is clear. Good job. So that was moved by Liz and seconded by Adam. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, that passes. Thank you all. We have our budget done for the year.
I'm sorry, I have a question. Regarding athletic fees, did we cover that, or do we skip that?
It's next.
Yes. No, they're showing underneath the budget. Did we have a diligent snafu there?
So, Sherry, do you want to talk about athletic fees?
Sure. We're looking for the school committee to vote an increase in the athletic fees for the upcoming 2026-2027 school year. We're looking to increase the per sport amount from $350 to $365, so a $15 increase. And we're also proposing an increase of the additional fee for the ice hockey or alpine skiing from $250 to $275. We want to keep the family cap at $1,200. And we also want to keep the junior high and senior high extracurricular activity fees as the $50 one-time fee.
So one of the things with the main part of the athletic fee and the reason of the increase, we actually want to add a certified strength and conditioning coach, which is something that most high schools our size in Division I would typically have a certified strength and conditioning coach that's accessible to all teams in the athletic department. We don't have the money in the budget to be able to add that position, but the increase in the fees, families would essentially be increasing their fees in order to have that benefit for their students in the athletic program. It's a significant benefit to students in large Division I high schools to be able to have access to that position, and where it's budget neutral, we think it's a good use, and I don't think families generally would mind paying a few dollars more in order to have a significant upgrade to the program.
Lakshmi.
Do we have some kind of grant where if a student can't afford it, we do step in?
Do we have scholarships available for athletic fees?
We have the whole financial assistance program. So if somebody fills out the financial assistance, we kind of go through the process, and if they're eligible, it is towards athletic fees as well.
Okay, thank you.
Glenn, did you have your hand up earlier?
Strength training has changed my life. This is a good use of it.
Vikram?
Just regarding the assistance program, and there's a way, of course, that people are able to do it with, sort of, I don't know, privately? Is that right? There's a method to do that privately? Okay.
Andrew?
Thanks. I get a lot of questions about this. My kids are all over sports, and so people talk to me about things. But one of the questions that keeps coming up is about how each sport charges $350 or $365. And the question comes is, are these fees aligned to the sports themselves? Do they go into, where does the money go? How does the money spent? I don't think there's a lot of transparency in the community as to how, once we gather the funds together, how it's dispersed and how it's used. Because I know there's outside groups that bring in lots of money to be able to help us with various parts of it. And it's different for sports than it is for clubs. As we say here, $50 one-time fee, join as many clubs as you like. $365 per sport, which means that if you play a sport in February or in fall, spring, and winter, you're at $1,000 underneath the $1,200 fee limit, but still a ton of money. And I know we upped it the last couple years. Even with the financial assistance, it can be a barrier for kids to be able to get into this. I'm just curious, specifically right now, can you talk about where the money goes once it's collected and how it's aligned to either the individual teams or what happens with it?
Sure. When Jim Scanlon, who's our athletic director, when he puts together his budget, he puts two separate budgets. He does one budget under the general fund and one budget under the athletic revolving fund. All of these funds go into athletic revolving fund, so it helps fund his overall budget. It's sometimes for coaching, transportation, referees. He has a whole budget process he does. Those combined are our fees that come in and our gate receipts that come in. That money also goes into that revolving account. So between the general fund piece and the revolving fund piece, it funds the whole entire budget for athletics.
So it's not aligned to the sport, it goes to the department parses it out to the sports. So if the sports themselves have issues with budgets coming to them, talk to Jim.
If we try to have enough money in the revolving account to cover everything, there has been a couple of years where the general fund has had to kind of supplement some of the revolving account, but no, it is not sports specific. So if the football team had this much money that came in and the tennis team had this much money comes in, it all goes towards the whole entire athletic program.
Okay, I see more questions. Adam?
I actually have a quick question. Do you need us to vote this?
Vikram?
Just another question. Are those numbers public on how he divides that money up, or how that money is divided up from that fund?
It's a public document, our budgeting.
Okay. So it's not sort of arbitrarily as someone, okay, thank you.
You know what, I'm going to actually suggest that we come back. We don't need this part tonight because it's independent of the budget, but we do not have a specific vote listed on the agenda for this, so we'll bring that back for next meeting.
Okay, sounds good. All right. That brings us down to subcommittee member reports, and we do actually have one we need to do. Does anybody from negotiations, policy, or budget want to give an update? Go for it, Adam.
I have a quick one that's related to budget. Last night, I attended the Massachusetts Association of Regional Schools sort of policy update. There are roughly now 280 districts that are in what's called hold harmless, which means that their enrollment has declined to the point at which that they're only getting that minimum aid that we get now. They recognize that there are districts like ours that have been in hold harmless for decades, but there's a growing number of schools that are in that challenging position. And so Mars is putting together an advocacy campaign similar to what we did last year, asking for the legislature to look at the Chapter 70 funding model, to look at some of those extraordinary costs, to look at the inflation cap, all of those things. If anybody's interested, I'll happily share the slides with you, but I know that we're busy. Glenn, as soon as I get them, I will for sure send them to you, but not specifically budget sub, but budget related. This continues to be, the problem that we're facing continues to be a problem throughout the Commonwealth. There are more than I can count number of communities that are going for Proposition 2.5 overrides this year, and they're all doing the same doomsday planning that we've had to do in the past, which is if this doesn't pass, then what can we do? How many people do we have to cut? So it's cold comfort that we're not alone.
Thanks.
One thing, just if you're watching the news and overrides, I don't know if you saw Brookline's override number. So Brookline has 7,000 students, we have 5,000. The Brookline proposed override is $25 million. That's the level of deficit that a lot of the districts are now finding themselves in. And most of that is on the schools, they've said. So that is certainly a significant gap.
Okay. All right, I've got an ALG update. So ALG met last Thursday morning, and Select Board and School Committee were at the point that we feel like the multi-year financial model is what we're ready to bring back to our committees and boards for a thumbs up. Finance Committee is still thinking about it, so they may still have some questions, but with us passing our budget here, I can say with confidence that the net position at the bottom for the town of Acton is a 0. In other words, we have, with our estimated revenues coming in and the budgets that we're going to bring to town meeting, we're not going to have a fight on the floor for money. So that is one of the big goals of ALJ, is to figure that out. But the model is in your packet if you would like to look at it, but we don't have any issues with it. Leela, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to this. No, it's been a lot of work. Everybody doing what they're supposed to do, having these conversations. So does anybody have any concerns with the model that is shown in the packet that I need to bring back to ALG? We're all good with that? Okay, awesome, thank you. Anything else on subcommittee or liaison reports? We've almost never gotten to do these this year. All right, that's exciting. In that case, we should move on to the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda do not usually require discussion and are approved with one vote unless any member would like to hold an item for discussion and a separate vote. I'll read each item, and if a member would like it held, please say hold. Members do not have to have attended a meeting to vote on the minutes. Item 6A, approval of Acton-Boxborough Regional School Committee meeting minutes from March 5th, 2026. Item 6B, recommendation to approve budget transfers per policy DJB. And item 6C, approval of warrants as presented in the packet. All right, given that no items were held, is there a motion to approve the consent?
So moved.
Second. That was moved by Adam. I'm going to give that second to Leela. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you, Ben. With that, we are good there.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
That was moved by Adam, seconded by the whole committee. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great. Thank you all.